What's going on, guys? And welcome back to another episode of Big Brain Takes, the BBT podcast. As you can see, there are only two of us clowns here today. That'll either be a good thing or a bad thing. My name is Sam, Stardust Nobody, and I'm a cool guy. At least I like to think so. But we also have my other boy here. Say what up, Josh Forte. Say what up.
What's up, guys? Welcome to another podcast. Always a pleasure to be on here, and I'm looking forward to today's discussion. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Okay, I'm excited too.
Yes,
Earlier
sir.
in the month, we were talking about ideas for the podcast with the boys, and we were like, anime movie podcast, that'd be a cool one. But when we were talking about it, we were like, it seems that me and Forte are the only ones that are like, well, Forte and I are the only ones that are super invested in and super invested in the idea. So instead of dragging other people into this, we just went with the idea of, let's do it by ourselves. Let's make this a one-on-one podcast and potentially make it a recurring thing. So
hmm
Forte and I, this week, we sat down and we decided what movies we wanted to watch and have our thoughts on for this podcast. We watched 5 movies in 5 days. Your Name, Weathering with You, Akira, A Silent Voice, and Pokemon the first movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, boy!
Yes, sir.
In
Peak fiction.
today's peak fiction, bro. Peak fiction.
hmm
You may have heard my rants about Mewtwo on last week, so you're gonna have a lot more of that on this week. So be prepared. In today's episode, we're just going to be going through our general thoughts on these movies, and at the end, we're going to do a little bit of a ranking, give our scores on all the movies, and just say overall which of them was our favorite. So, we might as well go with the anime movie we started and watched first, Your Name. This movie, I hadn't seen it before, Forte had.
hmm
I have some thoughts in it, but I want to let Forte, the certified Your Name lover, take the lead on this one.
All right. So I was excited to show Sam Your Name. It was a very popular anime movie. I feel like it was the first anime movie that was really truly a crossover where people who had never been a part of the anime community before went to the theaters, saw the movie, or they purchased a DVD, or they talked about it with others. It was one of those kind of anime that just seemed to tie everyone together and kind of bring people into the anime sphere. So even without the actual plot and the ranking on the movie, I love Your Name for that. I guess it had a similar role that Demon Slayer did, which I have mad respect for it for that of and of itself. Your Name is personally my favorite romance anime movie. I just think it did a lot of things well. It showed what it was like to take a mile in someone's shoes, if you will, to a literal extent. If you don't know anything about Your Name, it has this kind of sci-fi element where the main guy and the main girl are switching bodies continuously, and they're living life through each other's perspective. It's just the ultimate epitome of the best way to learn and to sympathize with people, or I guess in this case, to empathize with people, is to walk in their shoes. So, from a symbolic sense, I love that. I really love the romance aspect. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention how great the music and the animation was for Your Name. It's one of those movies that is a true cinematic experience. You can watch three episodes of anime in a row. If you could just take out the openings and the endings and just combine 3 episodes of anime together for that, or I guess more like 4 episodes for whatever would be a 2 hour or 1.5 hour runtime, you would get a great experience, assuming it's a good anime. But there's just something about movies like Your Name that has this true cinematic experience where your eyes are just glued to the screen, where you feel just super immersed in the characters, the scenery, the background, the music, just everything that I don't think you would get if you just took 4 episodes of anime and just combined them into 2 hours, right? So I think Your Name accomplished that really well. Uh, my only gripe with Your Name, obviously, is kind of coming from the sci-fi element and a little bit of the character development. I think Mitsuha, our main girl, Sam and I spoke a little bit about this. Our main girl Mitsuha is more developed than Taki. I think Taki's a great character, but I would have liked to learn more about him, and I'm sure we'll have a more in-depth discussion about that after I give my initial thoughts. And then the sci-fi element is explained to us, but it's just kind of there. It's weird to say. They give us enough to understand what's going on, but it feels like you don't get enough background information as to why this is happening. They just kind of give you the sci-fi element and they run with it. And I think a lot of that comes from the fact that you're trying to fit in a lot of things into the 2 hour runtime. So, as I mentioned, the strengths of a movie, it also is kind of a double edged sword and it has that weakness. But overall, I just thought Your Name is. I think it's a great experience, and I was glad to show you the movie because I just felt it's an amazing experience, and it's definitely one I think you should have as an anime fan. I do think Your Name is one of those movies you should experience at least once. I mean, I don't like to be a gatekeeper with anime or anything, but it's a great experience, even if you didn't like it, right? I just think the cinematic experience is very much worth it. But I don't want to ramble on with my initial thoughts. What did you overall think of the movie, Sam?
I overall thought it was a really solid movie. I think we have like
Hmm.
some similar thoughts on it. I just think some of
Right.
the problems with the movie were a bit more of a not necessarily a turn off, but mean a bit more to me when including it in my overall thoughts than you. I love the
Hmm.
setting, love the animation, the music, the sci-fi element. It was explained well enough, but in general, I'm not a huge fan of sci-fi being inserted into romance or the. I'm not a big
Yeah.
fan of time travel in general. I think while it was explained, I don't think I would have understood it like nearly as consistently if I didn't have a person like you there to explain it to me when I'm like, hey, yo, what the hell? This scene's happening here and this scene here and uh, okay then.
Hmm.
And in general, I like the movie. I honestly think it's a really solid movie. It's not my favorite though. It's spoiler
Okay.
alert. It's definitely not my favorite of the ones we watched today. It was a very solid movie. Mitsuha is adorable. I love her to pieces. Great character. And I like Taki. I like Taki a lot as a person, but as a character, I feel that was a bit lacking for me. I like him.
Yeah.
I like what they did with his character. It's just one of those characters that the whole point of the movie is that it tries to set up that these two characters, Mitsuha and Taki, are on equal grounds. But there's so much more to Mitsuha as a person and a character than there is to Taki. You know about her life, her friends, her struggles, her parents, her backstory. You know a lot more about her. You see her in her day to day life. We really don't see much of that with Taki. We have like the
Right.
thing with his friends at school and then his job, but other than that, we see him living alone with his father. That'd be like a cool plot point to actually expand on and give some more of a duality between the two, because obviously Mitsu has a lot of problems with her father, despite only having her father be alive, while Taki seems to be with his father only. That would have been a cool plot point. Have Taki explain more of his mindset and all this and his reaction to more things. It very much felt like a movie that the plot of it, the whole goal of it, was to have both of these characters be fitting into each other's shoes, but more than not, it felt just like Taki was in Mitsuha's shoes, and that's all we really ever got. Taki's backstory, Taki's life, Taki as a character kind of just got brushed to the side, and
Right.
a lot of times in the movie just to give Mitsuha that presence. And I could be like completely misunderstanding the movie. I could be completely misunderstanding that, and the whole point of it is for Mitsuha to get the main focus. But I personally felt that they were trying to convince us as the viewer that both of these characters are on equal grounds. Both of these characters are equally important, but it never hit that for me. I like the music.
Hmm.
The animation is gorgeous, and as you went on about it being a cinematic experience, I can't really comment on that because I didn't get to see it in the cinema. That's my problem. I
Okay.
think if I saw this
Yeah.
in a
Yeah.
cinema, I would like this movie infinitely more because I think it's one of those movies that not necessarily it draws you in with the characters of the story, it draws you in with its scope and its size and its larger than life appearance. It feels larger than life. It feels massive. It feels glorious. It feels grandiose. Almost every scene, every step, every scene, every background, every piece of music, it feels grandiose. It feels like you're in this big divine story. And I feel that in a cinema would have been an amazing experience, which I just can't sadly emulate because Your Name's not in the cinemas anymore.
Right. Right.
I think if I were to
Yeah.
rewatch
Yeah.
this at another point, I think I'd enjoy it a lot more. And I think if I would ever see it in the cinema, I could fall in love with this movie absolutely. But I did have some issues with it, and like we could go back forth a bit more. But
Hmm.
yeah, it just felt a bit disconnected at points. I wasn't a huge fan of the sci-fi element. I think it was a bit too confusing.
Okay.
And instead
Yeah.
of, and I felt there were more times where I was just trying to my brain was focusing on trying to justify and understand the time traveling aspect. When I think that should be an absolute second, and my focus at all times should be the emotional struggle and the emotional relationship between the two protagonists, Mitsuha and Taki. And I think
Yeah.
more time was spent on the sci-fi element than I think is necessary. I think a sci-fi element in a show or a series or a story, especially like this, should just be a tool that gives the characters in the story something to propel off. It felt like it tried to be its own plot point, and it felt like it tried to take focus away at times from the two characters. And there were times where I was just sitting there going, "What? What's this scene? When did this happen? When was this?"
Right.
And it's
Right.
like
Right.
it's it just felt a bit disconnected at points. But overall, I mean, a bit. I know I'm sounding a bit harsh on this, but I did like the movie a lot. It's still a
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
solid movie. Very solid movie.
For
Gorgeous as well.
I really agree with all your points there. the deal with Taki not having as much character as Mitsuha, it was very strange. I like you said, he's clearly living alone with his father in this apartment. So I would have loved to learn, is his mother passed away? Were his parents married? Are they divorced now? I would have just loved to learn a little more about his family dynamic, because we got so much with Mitsuha's backstory, and we learned a lot about why her father became the politician he is today. And I would have loved to learn more about Taki's father and Taki's relationship to his father. They didn't even share. I think they had like two scenes of dialogue of, your dinner's in the oven, I'm going to work. I think that was their
Yeah,
only dialogue,
yeah,
which was unfortunate. And a lot of Taki's character was very much show versus tell, while Mitsuha, you saw all of her backstory and everything both ways. The only reason I knew he wanted to be an architect is because, first of all, he could draw really well, and in one scene in the background, there's a poster of that just says architecture. I'm like, okay, well, I guess I know what he wants to do with his life. And then obviously you get a little bit more of that because
and I have
what
no
he wants
problem
to
with show
do.
versus tell. By the way, I have no problem with show
Oh,
versus
me
tell.
neither. Me neither. I just
It
wanted equal, right?
it just
Yeah.
feels a bit like a bit sudden, a bit stark when you have a character that's all tell but show, and then you have the other characters that
Right.
are meant to care about and view on an equal
Hmm.
footing, taking a completely different way to showcase their character. Both are good, and
Right.
I think I think it's a really, really nice duality. But I think there was, even in the show versus tell aspect, I think there was more put into telling us about Mitsuha than there was put into showing us about Taki.
About Kentucky, exactly. And then for the sci-fi element for me, I know you don't particularly like time travel and that kind of sci-fi element, and for me, it's kind of hit or miss. I've seen so many movies and anime that have handled time travel differently, and if
I've only seen very few that have handled it well. Like Steins Gate's one that comes to mind of one that was
right,
actually handled really,
yeah,
really well.
yeah, Steins Gate is good. I actually think, surprisingly enough, I know this is crazy. I think Dragon Ball did it pretty well,
I can't comment.
because they actually followed the theory that Steins Gate introduces, where if you travel back in time, you deviate from the time flow, so you can never affect the same timeline. If that makes sense, I'm probably not good at explaining it, but you have that timeline deviation, which is really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, so Dragon Ball follows that theory, which is a theory I'm personally a fan of in time travel. But as far as your name on the spectrum of time travel, I felt like it did a pretty good job. I feel like it does better than most time travel series
Fair
I've seen,
enough.
because those are very, very hit or miss. And for me, the time travel and the sci-fi aspect was, because you asked me in the beginning of the movie when we were watching it, is there an antagonist? And to me, the only antagonist was, I guess you could say, the comet, but also time itself. The time travel element, and from them being two different times, and what happened to Mitsuha in the past being different from Taki's current timeline, to me was just the ultimate conflict of why it would be so hard for them to ever be together. It added that extra layer of why their love is going to be so hard to, what should I say, form or to actually be kindled because of that. So for me, the time travel element was nice because it just gave this really great conflict. Like you said, this movie is larger than life, and that time travel element, that's like the ultimate reason of why someone can't be together. You see romance all the time of people coming from different families or even different origins, and that's in the way, typical Romeo Juliet type stuff has been done 100 times. But I do like what Your Name did, whereas you have the sci-fi element, and it turns out Mitsuha, her village, I guess village or town, has actually been destroyed, and we don't learn that until the middle of the movie, and that's the ultimate blockade of them ever coming together. So I didn't super love the time travel element. I like what it did for the conflict.
Fair enough. I think honestly,
Yeah,
honestly, I agree with all those points. I agree with all those
yeah.
points. Yeah, I can agree with
But
all those
it's
points.
also not my favorite movie anymore, which we can talk about later. But it's still really close for me. I still love the movie. It's still it holds a special place in my heart. So
Mm,
I've seen I've seen it enough now.
I've seen it once. If I ever rewatch it, I think this is one of those movies that if I were to rewatch it, my thoughts of it would increase. But this is just base thoughts. I could completely
Yeah.
change my thoughts and opinions and place on the story.
Oh yeah.
Whenever I
Hmm.
rewatch it in the future, it's just one of those things where I liked it. It hit hard in some parts, but then some parts I just felt weirdly
So
disconnected. But
yeah, I can understand
not to
that.
the point where it
Yeah.
was like too jarring or upsetting, but it was just like, okay.
Hmm.
As I said, there was more time me sitting here thinking, going, okay, rather than, oh my god, which I think the
Right.
movie tries to make you feel at points. But overall, really solid movie. Really, really
Hmm.
solid film.
Agreed. Agreed.
Is there anything else we all got to say about Your Name? I think it's the one that we actually have the least to say about, because...
Yeah, I think it is. It's also the first one we watched. So as time went on, I think we were just, more focused on the other ones, of course. But I think I've said everything I really have to say about it.
Really good voice
I
acting, by the way.
yeah.
Really good voice
Oh
acting. I
yeah,
forgot to
yeah,
mention that.
really
Really
great
good.
voice acting. I haven't seen the dub yet, but
I want to watch the
I
dub one
still
day because I've heard mixed
yeah,
things
for
about the
sure.
dub, but I like the sub. The sub was great. Gorgeous, gorgeous acting. Mitsuha.
Yeah,
I
whoever
cannot.
Mitsuha's VA is, clap clap.
I, in general, cannot express how much I love Mitsuha. She is adorable. She is precious. I love her to pieces. Great, great, great character.
Yeah,
Now
definitely
we
great
move
romance
on
interest.
to the second movie we watched, made by the same creator in the same universe? Quotation marks?
Yes, quote unquote. Yeah.
Weathering with You. Okay, then. This is a movie that I have a bit more to say about. I'm going to
Yeah.
say it from the beginning, and I'm probably going to get very mixed reactions on this. I liked Weathering with You more than Your Name. Weathering with
All
You
right.
hit me harder, hit me in the feels more. It just felt more, I don't want to say more polished, because I honestly think in terms of quality, both of them are pretty equal films. It's just the story Your Name had to tell and the story Weathering with You had to tell were very different stories to tell. And I think the story Weathering
Hmm.
with You had to tell did more for me personally. But on the
Yeah.
same token, protagonist wise, as my problem in the original was that Taki, and my problem in Your Name was that Taki and Mitsuha didn't get equal footing. I think that's something they actually did really well here, that Hodoka and Hina get equal footing.
Agreed.
But it also didn't help that Hodoka, for 95% of the film, was an unlikable piece of shit. I don't hate Hodoka. I don't hate him. He's a fine character. But my god, some things Hodoka did made me scratch my head so bloody hard.
Yeah,
So
I warned you guys going in, but continue. Yeah,
so bloody hard. That kid. I let's talk about the positives, and then I can move back to Hodoka.
sounds
Positives.
good.
Hina, genuinely great character. Sweet as she is so sweet, cute as a button. Great voice acting, great everything. I loved Hina. Hina was a great, great character. Natsumi. Oh, the amount of simpery that I now do for that woman is outside of this world, bro. Natsumi is a queen. Her design is perfect. Her voice acting is perfect. Her personality is perfect. Her chadliness in the movie was perfect. She was the ultimate Chad, and I love her, love her, love her. But my favorite character in the whole film, Keisuke Suga, that man, that character was such a well-written character. He sold me. I got sold on Keisuke as a character more than Hodoka, and there were specific reasons for that. Number one, Keisuke, while he very much appears in the beginning as he is some low-life, stingy piece of shit that you're like, damn, is he come looking for booty or some shit? Keisuke was, oh my god, the development, the backstory. The backstory wasn't like this big, over-the-top, sad thing, but you just know from the beginning that this person is the way he is because of a reason. And when they finally give you that reason, no matter how simple it is, and no matter how much they may kind of, I don't want to say brush over it, but no matter how much they just put it on the table, they don't like shove it in your face, they don't like here, cry your eyes out. They just do it so subtly, so specially, and it just works so much. Keisuke was such an awesome character. Loved his backstory with his wife. Loved his fight for his child. In general, that's one of that's one of my things in stories that tend to really touch me, is when it's like a parent or a guardian of a child who's not able to see them, or has something happened, or some things like that. Death with parents, or not being able to see your child. Is just one of the saddest things to me, because I don't know. I wouldn't even want to picture that as a father, not being able to see my children. That just that makes me so sad just thinking about it. I loved how much of a mentor figure he was to Hodoka. I loved him with Natsumi. Loved him in the final scene with the detectives. Takai, honestly, another cool character. Yuki Kaji, great voice actor. Really liked him, even if he was kind of like a Josuke looking motherfucker. Kind of a dick.
Yeah, Pompadour. Yeah,
Pompadour looking motherfucker.
Pompadour looking. Yeah.
But I really liked Keisuke. The amount of development, how much they put into him to help Hodoka grow, was just so well done, in my opinion. There was
Hmm.
so much to this character that I just loved. He hit it on so many cylinders for me. He just did it so well for me. I just could go on and on about this character. So
Yeah.
well done. Then we
Hmm.
have Hodoka. And this is where my problems with the movie start. I don't think he's an awfully written character. And while I may think he's an unlikable piece of shit at times, I don't hate him as a character or as a person. My big
Right.
problem is that in this movie, in the previous movie, Your Name, the problem that I had, as I said, was that Taki and Mitsuha were very much sold to the viewer as equal characters, but one had more than the other. In this movie, they do a lot better job of having Hodoka and Hina have equal screen time, an equal amount to them on screen. It's just
Right.
Hina felt so much more deep of a character when you look to her past. I'm in general one of those people that's like development and backstory are very separate things. One does not justify the other. But Hodoka just felt like a character that even if he had development, it just felt odd. I spent 2 hours of my movie of this with this kid, and I still feel like I know so little about him. All you know is that he
Yeah.
left home because
He was
he
bored.
was bored. Like,
Yeah,
I know it may
something like
sound
that.
similar to my problems with Taki, but Taki's problem is that he just
Yeah.
didn't get much on screen and then didn't get
Exactly.
backstory to get this. Hodoka got a lot on screen. It felt so weird because all the things that he had on screen, while he had the same amount of on-screen time and on-screen importance as Hina, a lot of the stuff that he had on screen only really made sense with the knowledge of what happened to him in the past. And all the things that he does in the movie only the only real explanation for them is the fact that he ran away from home. But not
Right.
knowing or ever seeing his parents, I did not like that. I did not like not seeing his parents. They made that a big
Hmm.
deal and a big part of his motivation as a character, and that just kind of got brushed over.
Exactly.
We didn't
Exactly.
see anything about his life. I'd love to have seen like more of a formation of why this kid was
Exactly.
brought to the conclusion of, oh, I can't do this. I feel constricted. I feel destroyed at home. I feel
Right.
that I wish we could have seen that. Like I said, the more of a formation of why this person was brought to those conclusions, why he acted the way he did, why he hurt the people he did, why he was so
Hmm.
reckless at times, why he just in general. I'd have loved to have seen a scene with him and his parents, or seen the scene where he ran away from his parents, or seen him fighting with his parents, or see him at his school, or see more to this character in his past. While he had a lot of good on-screen stuff, it just felt weirdly cheap and weirdly like I don't know you enough as a person
Hmm.
because all of the things you do on screen are completely based on your so-called backstory, but then we don't see any of that backstory. I still like
Right.
the
But
movie a lot. I think Hina is a strong enough character to hold the movie up. I think Natsumi in general was a great character. I think Keisuke was a great character. And in general, I
hmm
just felt more emotion from the key things about Your Name. Not with Weathering with You, sorry, than with Your
whether
Name.
anything. Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah, I agree with most of your points. I don't want to. Yeah, I guess I won't. I don't want to start out too negative, but I definitely agree with your points about Hodoka. Much of what Hodoka did on screen, and I think that you kind of alluded to this. The only reason you care about Hodoka is because a lot of the other characters are kind of building him up. You see his relationship with other characters more of what I care
There are
about.
times that
Him,
you feel. Sorry to
yeah,
interrupt, but there are times where I
yeah,
feel, for the majority of the film, honestly, they want you to care about
hmm
Hodoka, not because of who he is as a person, not because of his backstory, but simply because he's the protagonist.
yeah,
And
exactly.
you continue with your
Because
point.
yeah, because his backstory was he says something along the lines of he felt his home life and his town were just too restrictive. In a way, I think the creator wanted to parallel Hodoka's feelings about where he came from to Mitsuha's feelings about her place. If I could make that
Hmm.
parallel, because Mitsuha very much did not like her town life, her village. She felt it was too restrictive. There was
I think it
nothing
was
to
also
do.
meant to be a thing of just like
Yeah.
the parallel to the regular life of a Japanese child, because obviously, like a lot of Japanese families are a lot more. They're a lot more
r-
not rural, but a lot more just because of Japanese and a lot of Asian cultures and traditions. It's a lot more involved with your family, a lot more set down, a
right.
lot more generational households. That's a big thing. Like there are a lot of
Yeah, yeah,
generational
very much
households.
so.
And I
Hmm.
think the point is that he wanted the people to relate to Hodoka, as in the majority of just Japanese people, and like, oh, I know exactly how my life was as a child. I know exactly how my life was with my parents and the suffocation and all this stuff. But it's just
Hmm.
as a Western viewer, it doesn't have that
As a
same effect
Western
on
viewer,
me. It
yeah,
doesn't have that same
because
effect on me.
because both you and I come from a suburban type
Yes,
location, right?
suburban. Yeah,
Yeah, so it's really kind of the best of both worlds. We don't get that crazy city life where it's traffic everywhere. It's which I say the nightlife and all that, but we also aren't in like a small village where there's only one place to eat or like one cafe or no cafes in the case of
your name.
Mitsuha's complaints. Yeah, Mitsuha's complaints in your name. But so for that kind of relation, it didn't hit home for me. I definitely agree with you that. So I needed a little more. And when he said life was very restrictive, I had the impression that it wasn't just that his village had nothing to do. I felt like his parents may have been overbearing and he finally just said, I'm going to run away from home. I'm going to make it out on my own. But we just didn't get that. We didn't get any interaction with his parents. We didn't hear him say anything in particular about his parents or anything in particular about his location other than something very vague. It's too restrictive. We get that scene where he's on his bike and he's chasing, the beam of light in the ocean, almost like reaching for freedom. But that was just more symbolic. It still didn't get us anything more than I didn't like it at home. Uh, and that kind of continues on my other point with Hodaka. Everything he did, it kind of just felt like he was doing things for the sake of doing them. He would just kind of fall into situations. It felt like
Yeah,
I didn't know any of Hodaka's motivations until the end of the movie, and that one's obvious. He loves by the end of the movie, he loves Hina, right?
yeah.
That's his main motivation. But up until then, he didn't have any dreams or ambitions. At least with Taki, I knew he wanted to be an architect. He loved to draw, and then along the way, he fell in love with Mitsuha, and I was
And
like,
then he
okay,
had the thing with
this.
the other cafe woman in your name.
Yeah,
Your
exactly.
name.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, the
true. Yeah,
relationship.
he did have a crush on her in the beginning, and then at least I knew his hobbies and his motivations. Hodaka just kind of fell into stuff. He makes the what is it called? Sunshine for you, weathering. What did he call
The
uh
Sunshine Group. I don't even remember
sorry,
the names. I
yeah,
don't remember what
Sunshine
it is.
Girl, Sunshine for You, whatever. He, has the service, but that's because he had already met Hina, and he decided, okay, this is a business model. I was like, okay, that's kind of cool, I guess. I mean, I guess he's very practical, at least. He found a business model. That's cool, but it just felt like he would fall into stuff. That last scene with Hodaka was now I know they were trying to show that at this point he was super desperate to be with Hina because he loved her, right? That he was super desperate. I think a lot of his actions were kind of selfish, but he was a very interesting protagonist at the end. He felt just really volatile. I didn't particularly like it. He was pointing a gun at people. It's like it just felt a little outrageous at the end. Now, at least when Hina and he are reunited, I felt a little better about his character, but that scene was kind of weird for me. But going to the positives, Keisuke is an absolute Chad. I love that character to death. You get very subtle messaging about struggles with addiction. You get his backstory about how he was actually very similar to Hodaka. He had run away, he had found the love of his life, he had a child, and despite all of that, because you see with Hodaka how hard it is to run away from home to start a business in a big city that you're not from. Now, his business isn't exactly, what should I say, booming or the most successful, at least at the beginning of the movie, but still, he had the life he wanted. And to learn that a lot of that was stripped away and how he struggled with that, it was really sad. To me, it was the more sad parts of the movie other than the main conflict. And it was to see him gradually grow his relationship again with his daughter, to gradually become more optimistic about the world, to even have a relationship with Hodaka and his niece Natsumi, of course. That was one of the more endearing parts of the movie for me. I think Keisuke is an absolute Chad, and for some reason, the writing for him was better than the main protagonist. Now, I can see the parallels there that Keisuke is kind of an older version of Hodaka. Everything Hodaka is doing, other than obviously the sci fi element of the movie, Keisuke has done before. He speaks through experience, and oftentimes he will tell Hodaka it's time to grow up. And I thought that was really important because I definitely think the writer wanted us to know that Hodaka was very much a kid, and he was very immature, and all his actions showed that. Him picking up guns, making poor decisions in life, things like that. So I thought Keisuke was a Chad. I agree. Natsumi is what peak fiction waifu, right?
Hey yo,
Definitely
Sin.
great great design, great character, ultimate wing girl, wing man, if you will, ultimate Chad. I loved her. I love what she did for Hodaka at the end, taking him on the bike to escape from the police to get him closer to finding Hina on top of the building. I love that. Keisuke becomes a Chad at the end, where he's struggling with ideals and realism, right? He knows Hodaka really wants to see Hina, but he's saying, you need to go home. It's time to grow up. But at the end, he chooses to go with his ideals, and he tackles the police officer and helps Hodaka trying to reach his goal, which is Hina. It's a cool parallel where he thinks the sci-fi element, which is the Sunshine Girl having the ability to change the weather. He's like, I don't believe this, but there's a part of me that does believe it, and I believe that Hodaka believes it, and I want to do everything I can to help him. And Keisuke is an absolute chat. He may be is between him and another character from another movie that we've seen. I think are the best characters in the movies as a conglomerate that we saw. But I think those are my overall thoughts. I guess I'll talk more about the sci-fi element. I really like the sci-fi element
I
of
think
this
it's
one.
better than Your
Less
Name, to be honest. It was a
Yeah,
lot less confusing for me. Yep.
yeah, I was just about to say it's definitely less confusing, and there's more explanation for it that it's and how it relates to Japan and Tokyo, and how it's gone through a generational thing. There's always been one shrine maiden or weather maiden, excuse me, that could change the weather, and this has just been this way from time. And what the weather maiden faces, her powers. I really like the sci-fi element, and I like the way Hina developed with the sci-fi element,
Love
if you
Hina.
will.
She was such a
I
cool
love Hina.
character. Love her.
Yeah, Hina was a great character. Hina and Mitsuha are very equal in my book. I think they just got amazing character and development. I love that Hina was doing everything she could to take care of her brother after her mom had passed away. I loved I loved her relationship. It was a very short scene, but I loved that the reason she became a weather maiden was just she just wanted one last day with her mom to just be sunny. Just the last day. She knows her mom's about to pass away. She just at least wanted it to be sunny, and I thought that was super sad and super beautiful. I could go on longer, of course, but overall thoughts of Weathering with You, it was a really great movie. The more I talk about it, the more I see why you like it more than your. I think they're very much on par, right? I think they're very much on par.
Same.
Yeah, I do think at the end of Weathering with You, we got a little more of that romance element too. I did want to see Taki and Mitsuha actually embrace. I like the way they ended it because it ends with "What's your name?" right? Because they're trying to remember each other's names, and they finally come together. They know something's up. They know they've met each other before. They have that feeling, even though they don't have the memories. But I just love seeing Hodaka and Hina just embrace and hug right at the end. It was a beautiful scene, and just seeing how Hodaka chose her over the weather, if you will. How they kept saying that they truly changed the world because they chose love over the more,
I
what should
really
I say,
like that. I do
the more
really like that.
realistic and idyllic approach of actually making the weather normal. They chose one another instead. I like that. I thought it was beautiful.
I think
So
it's really nice from an emotional
it's not
perspective.
practical. It's not
But
practical, but
it
yeah.
was one of those things where it also lies in my problems with Hodaka being selfish. It's like I understand why he did it. I'm happy he did it. But it also
Right.
doesn't make me feel good seeing genuinely good people like Keisuke, like that old lady who was with him at the beginning, to see these genuinely good people suffer just so he can do what he's always done and be reckless and
Yeah.
not care about most other people other than his own wants and
Hmm.
needs at the time. I think obviously it was a really sweet, happy thing, but it's also, when you think about it, everyone else's lives have to be suffer and
Altered. Yeah,
altered, but
exactly.
just so he
Hmm.
can do what he's done the entire film, and that's act on his own emotion and his own
Right.
recklessness
Now, I will
and
say
be
the film
happy.
does kind of rectify that because he talks with the old lady and he does genuinely feel guilty that that all Japan is underwater, right? Or Tokyo, I guess. I don't know if all of Japan, but Tokyo for sure is very much underwater, and people are now in high rises. And he's talking with that old lady who had made a request to the Sunshine Girl service like 2 years ago, and he's talking to her, and he's saying, "Well, I don't see this as a problem before." I know it sounds crazy, but she's saying the weather has been like this before. Before in the Edo period, this is what Japan looked like, and people are constantly telling him like, "You guys didn't change the world. We will learn to live this way, and the world has looked like this before." So at least the movie kind of rectified that.
It does,
He
but it also
made
doesn't make
the
me feel
right
good.
choice.
I still feel
Yeah, it doesn't make me
bad.
feel good. And here's food for thought for you. Now, this is obviously an anime and a great romance, but they did all this so that they could date one another, and hopefully their love is true. But if they ever broke up, that would kind of suck.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That would suck. and I think that's with the idyllic side of the movie versus the realistic, and I feel like that's the conflict in Weathering with You. Realism and ideals, your heart and what's actually practical. I feel like is a
Yep.
conflict with the
Truth
movie.
and ideal
But
sounds like a certain other thing we
sounds
kind of
like
like.
something. Yeah, I know.
Solid
But yeah, those are my thoughts. Solid film.
film.
Yeah, really good film.
And
Really
I
good
want to
film.
give like,
Great music again.
yeah, I was
Great
about to
music
say,
again.
I wanted to say give credit to the music. I like the music in this one way more than Your Name. Grand Escape,
Okay.
that song, oh my god, every time I hear Grand Escape, the emotion comes over me. That scene was, oh my god, I love that track so much. I,
I
in,
love Grand Escape. It's
I in
amazing.
general like the music, and it was a bit more memorable to me this time in Weathering with You than it was in
Okay.
Your Name. But I liked
I like the
both.
music about the same, but yeah, I can understand. It is the same band, but yeah, the music is good in both. But I can understand liking this one more than Your Name. I could definitely see that.
Now it's time for the most controversial movie on here for us,
Let's go.
Akira.
All right.
I'm gonna be blunt. I did not love this movie. I thought this movie was okay. I thought this movie was okay with one likable character.
Hmm.
We're gonna start it off. I don't think this movie's bad. I'm just gonna make that very clear. This movie is not bad. It clearly shaped the industry and had a very, very large impact and effect on the shape of anime as a whole, especially from the movie perspective. Animation, even if the faces looked weird as shit sometimes, was really,
Goodness.
really clean. The art style, the color, the the environment, the setting, all genuinely really cool. Where it lacks is making me give a shit. I
Yeah.
like Kaneda. I'm going to say that from the beginning. Kaneda was a cool protagonist. Also helped because this is actually one of the ones I actually watched in dub because I wanted to see the dub because my favorite voice actor ever, Johnny Young Bosch, was voicing Kaneda. And I think he did a good job as Kaneda. I will say one thing about the dub though, which is very rarely an issue for me normally, is
Lip syncing.
the lip syncing was odd. It was
It was so weird. Yeah.
odd. And like in general, I think it's because like Akira has very much more of a. Most anime in general have like a lip flap. Most animation in general has
Right.
lip
Right.
flaps. What Akira did is it actually tried to, with the animation, make the shapes and things that the human mouth makes with the letters and the words, which is really, really hard to dub. So this is not against the dubbers. Just in general, the animation style of Akira very much tried, as at least in my opinion, tried to very much emulate the mouths and the shapes that the human mouth makes when speaking, very much more than like regular anime where the lips go up and down, just lip flaps. I like the cast. I will say another thing. The cast and the dub, Jamieson Price, Wendy
Oh, yeah.
Lee, Steve
Solid.
Blue, Matt
Hmm.
Mercer, Michelle Ruff. Great, great, great. Amazing. Some of my favorite actors ever. Love them to pieces. Absolute goats. I can watch. My mindset is, and I think Forte's the same. I don't hate dubs. I don't hate subs. I don't like. I don't really don't have a preference. It's just some actors I think are good beyond them. I think there are amazing Japanese actors, just as I think there are amazing Korean actors, just as I think there are amazing German actors, English actors. I think there are amazing actors in every single side of the industry, and they all deserve their own equal footing. They are all good, in my
Exactly.
opinion. I don't like love every dub. I don't love every sub. I don't love every German film. I don't love every that. But I think there are genuinely good actors, and I don't really care. I can watch a movie in dub. I can watch a movie in sub. As long as it's good, then I don't give a shit. But
Right.
Akira, back to Akira. This
Yeah.
movie really struggled in making me give a shit. Uh, I liked Kaneda, as I said. I liked Kaneda. I liked Johnny Young Bosch. That's a big reason I like Kaneda. But other than Kaneda, and even like in some points of Kaneda, I just kind of cared because, again, he was the protagonist. And I cared because he was voiced by my favorite actor. And he had a likable enough personality, but I don't know, man. I just didn't love this movie. It was good. It was fine. But I
Hmm.
didn't love this movie. I didn't really like the tone. I didn't like the. Obviously, there's a lot more in the manga that wasn't got covered in the movie. I didn't like many of the characters. The only other one that I kind of liked was the Colonel. He was kind of
Yeah,
cool.
the Colonel. I kind of like the Colonel.
I
Yeah.
don't know if this is like a really unpopular opinion or not, but I couldn't stand Tetsuo. I don't think he's an awfully written character. He's fine. He reminds me of a lot of another character we're going to be talking about a bit later. But
Hmm.
he just was really, really annoying. Every time he was on screen doing and flexing his powers, he just felt annoying. I couldn't
Yeah.
find I don't like looking at things in black and white, but I tried to find some deeper meaning. I'd love to. I'll probably rewatch this movie eventually. My opinions may change again, but Tetsuo just felt super disconnecting. I never connected with that character at all. It was never one of those
Yeah,
things where they try to make you feel bad for him because obviously these experiments were handed on to him like outside of his own free will. But then he immediately just acts on it like as a maniacal dick, and I'm like, I like maniacal dicks. I like my bastard anime characters, but I like it when they're fun. I like it when they have charisma, when they have personality. I didn't get charisma. I didn't get personality. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel tragedy. I didn't feel anything for this character other than you are annoying. Every time he was on
yeah,
screen preaching about some bullshit, I just didn't care. I just did not care. And I think I'll admit I wasn't the hugest fan of the character designs in this movie. The character designs I thought looked
oh yeah, yeah.
odd. Not my favorites.
I,
Not my favorites
I'm
I've
not
seen.
I'm not the hugest fan myself. Yeah, to go off your thoughts on Akira, we'll start with Tetsuo. Obviously, I think he was, and it's strange because he's our main antagonist. Well, I guess, yeah. I guess you could say he and the Colonel, but he's our main villain antagonist because he's the one who has the psychic powers, which I'll call
Mm-hmm.
them for the movie's sake. But I, they gave him an interesting dynamic with Kaneda. He obviously his backstory is nothing super deep or anything. He was just tired of being less than Kaneda. He felt like he was always being rescued by Kaneda. He felt like he just wasn't as cool as Kaneda, not as strong, not as good as riding a bike. They start off They start off with introducing his character.
I do like the
Kaneda has a,
dualities between those two characters. I will say I
I
like the
do as
dualities
well.
between Tetsuo and Kaneda. One of the
They
great things
start
in
out
this
with
movie.
exactly. They start out with Kaneda having the super souped up bike, right? That he stole. Is the idea, and it's a custom. And he says, "Well, you could never ride this bike, so why don't you just move aside? You can never handle this bike." And then he's like, I could if I wanted to, basically." And they start chasing this rival gang and doing their thing, gang wars. And sure enough, Tetsuo on his own bike is chasing this guy and actually crashes. And then he has to get back on the bike. And that's how he ends up in this situation anyway of being experimented on because he's trying to show off. He goes over the top and starts beating people with pipes and, trying to be cool riding his bike. And he ends up in an accident and he's taken by the colonel and experimented on. But their relationship was very interesting. Is the idea of once Tetsuo received these powers, he felt like he had finally made it. He was now the strongest one in the group, the strongest one in the world by the end of it. He had transcended his old self. So, like you said, it was hard to feel sorry for him in these experimentations because he eventually just became so okay with his powers to the point that he was flexing on everyone to the
But it's
point he
not
was
even like
killing
one of
it.
those things where he
Yeah,
was. It's not necessarily the fact that he became okay with his powers or his destruction. He just didn't back it up with any personality or any like sad moments or anything that made me care. It's not that I didn't feel bad
right.
for him. It's that I just didn't care at all.
Yeah,
I'll take a character like Aizen, for example. Aizen is a character that I genuinely think is a conceited piece of trash. He's a conceited fucking dick who takes control of everyone and uses everyone for his plans. But there's more to him. He has a lot of personality, he's got charisma, he's fun, he's entertaining. And when you think about it in a deeper sense, like the dualities between him and Ichigo, with the things about Kyoka Suigetsu and Getsuga Tensho, and like other things like to do with his tragedy, I'm like, Aizen is one of those characters that I actually feel a bit bad for because of what
right.
led him to his conclusions. A character like Tetsuo, I didn't feel bad for him at all. If he had had some more
Yeah.
personality or even was more fun, I'd be at least be able to say, oh, he was a fun villain. But he wasn't fun. He was just annoying and preachy. And it's like, I could be completely
What?
wrong. My opinions may change if I ever
Yeah,
were to
yeah.
hear like again, if I were to like hear someone's analysis or hear someone like actually who likes Tetsuo a lot try and explain to me him as a character. I think I'd enjoy him a bit more. I think he's a character that I could enjoy, but
What I will say about Tetsuo, the reason I do still feel somewhat bad for him is while he was, I think, I think he had already had a certain mental space. I think that these powers and this experimentation just sort of pushed him over the edge,
I
and
mean,
that's
fair
why he
enough.
became, yeah, that's why he became the person he became towards the end of the movie.
I don't hate the
He had
guy.
already been, yeah, I don't hate him either. That's why I feel somewhat bad for him. I think he was already suffering, not necessarily from a mental disorder or anything like that, but he had already had these strong feelings of inadequacy, and the experimentation and finally getting these powers just really pushed him over the edge. I mean, for lack of a better word, it's nothing super deep. He became power hungry
Yeah.
by the end of the movie. That's pretty much his character, and it's because he had been so low on the totem pole throughout his earlier years, that when he finally received these powers, he just went completely overboard. And some of that's his fault, some of it's not his fault. I mean, at the end of the day, he was just a kid who had received this terrible experimentation. But like you said, he's not a character I just super cared about or super related to. I understand what they wanted to show with the movie, but it didn't resonate with me like it did with many fans. I think I have the same feelings about Akira. Akira, now I know I said this about Your Name, but Akira is definitely the movie on this list that most anime fans, new and young, know that, okay, this is like the Shakespeare, right, of anime, the Romeo Juliet, those kind of things. If you're an anime fan, you need to watch Akira at least once. Now, you could also say that about like shows like Evangelion that have altered or that have made the medium and changed the medium. So when I first saw Akira, I was expecting to be blown away, right? And this is my second time seeing it, and both times my opinion has remained the same on Akira. I know what they wanted to do symbolically. I liked what they did with the end of the movie, where Tetsuo very much, in my interpretation, finds peace because he's transcended the world and he's found peace in a different space, if you will, whatever you want to call it. So, in the way for Tetsuo's character, I feel like he had a happy ending, and I did enjoy that. And I know the symbolic meaning of what the Colonel wanted to do, because this is a post-apocalyptic world, quote unquote. It's after a huge World War III that had happened years prior, and I understand what the Colonel wanted to do with this project and what he wanted to do with Akira. So I appreciate that. I even like the setting. I really did like the setting of Akira. I love my gritty post-apocalyptic world. I liked I liked the kind of gang fight at the beginning. Honestly, I would have probably liked the movie more if they had just been more of a down-to-earth post-apocalyptic film. I understand the symbolism of God and wanting to transcend and what Akira is, what Tetsuo is. I understand that. It didn't hit home for me as much as other movies did
Honestly,
on
I
this
can agree
list.
with all these
Yeah.
points. I know this is a
Yeah.
podcast, is a lot of us just agreeing, but honestly,
Yeah, I
it's just
know.
the truth.
I wish we didn't.
I wish we
But
did, but
yeah.
we do. It's the
Yeah.
truth. It's one of those things where I can
Yeah.
understand what they were going for. It just didn't
Exactly.
do
I
anything
get
for
it.
me.
Yeah.
It just didn't do anything for me. It didn't hit me. It didn't impact me. I didn't leave the film going, oh, I love that. I left the film going, eh?
I know
Eh?
what you wanted
I
from
know
me,
what you
but
wanted, but...
and I think I have this more defensive take for it because with movies like Akira and Evangelion, now I love Evangelion way more than Akira, but
Mm-hmm.
with movies like Akira, I feel like if you say, I didn't really like it, it didn't resonate with me, the other person in the room will say, well, maybe you just didn't understand the nuances or the symbolism.
Oh,
It's
same.
like,
Yeah, oh,
no,
yeah.
I just didn't enjoy the film.
I
But I think
understand it.
Akira's
Like, yeah.
okay. It's like a 7.5. I'll go ahead and say it's like a
It was like a
7.5 for
7.
me.
I mean, it was like a
Yeah,
7 for me. 7.
which out of 10 for you fans out there, that's really good. 5 would be okay. So 7 is above average. That's decent
It's
film.
definitely
And
not. It's
yeah,
definitely a decent
yeah,
film. Remember going in on it. I
definitely.
do not
Hmm.
dislike the film. It just
Yeah,
did not live up to the expectations that like many people have
exactly.
like given it for
It
years and
didn't
years and
have it didn't
years.
have that grandiose cinematic experience that while we haven't experienced personally, I could feel from the other movies we mentioned before. It didn't do that for me. And I wanted to like it more because I really love the setting. And I like you said, Kaneda, I love that character. I think he's really great. Um, the rest of the characters were just there. The Colonel was good. I think the Colonel was a strong character. Didn't agree with
He
his
really was.
beliefs, but I liked what he presented in the film Akira. I think it was a good, okay film. I just wanted more, and
It's one
I
of
felt
those
like they
things
did more.
where it
Yeah.
felt more like I don't want to say it felt like an essay, but it felt like one of those things where
Yes.
I took away the critical. I took the fact that like the critical things I was trying to achieve. I took it and I'm like I can understand this. I
Hmm.
can understand what you're trying to achieve, but it just didn't entertain me. It didn't affect me on a personal level.
Right.
I like Evangelion a lot, but that's always been one of my things with Evangelion. I view it
Hmm.
much higher in a critical sense than I do a personal sense. From a critical sense, I can say this series is like almost like I don't want to say it's almost perfect, but it kind of almost is. Incredible
Yeah, it
show.
really is.
Incredible
Hmm.
show. But from a personal aspect, I wasn't thoroughly entertained. I didn't enjoy myself. I didn't find relation with all these characters. I think like a thing for Shinji, a lot of people do is that they find a lot of relation in the character. He's very much a
Right.
character that's
Right.
written to be related
Hmm.
to. I didn't feel that. I've been through some of the things Shinji has. I've been through those. I think a lot of people have been through those really dark times of anxiety and depression and inadequacy. And like in a sense, Shinji's similar to Tetsuo. I just think Shinji's a lot better done. But
exactly.
I just didn't feel
Yeah, it's
that
a yeah.
personal impact from that show. But saying that, the personal impact I felt from Evangelion was a lot higher than the personal impact I felt from Akira.
Exactly.
There was more times in
Exactly.
Akira where I was just checking the time and seeing how much more I had left. With things like
Yeah.
Your Name, or Weathering with You, or even Evangelion, I was at least fucking watching, and I was at least focused, going, yeah, this is good shit.
Right.
With Akira, there was more times than not where I was just checking that time to see how much more of this movie's left, man. How much more of this movie's
Yeah.
left.
I definitely want to agree with that. With a lot of the movies we watched on this list, I think all of them but Akira, when you see something really great and it feels like time has just stopped. You start
Mm-hmm.
at 9 p.m. and then the movie ends and all of a sudden it's midnight, and for you it felt like time just didn't move for you. You were just so engrossed in the film. I just didn't have that with Akira. And to go off your point, I feel like Akira and even Evangelion to a certain degree, although I think Evangelion is much better, as I said,
Same.
I feel like they sacrifice a lot of their character development and a lot of their story and plot to give you those critical elements where I'm supposed to realize the symbolism and all that. And that's well and good, but I
I don't think
really
it's that it
like a story that
sacrifices
does
story.
both.
I don't think it's
So,
necessarily like it sacrifices character development or story. I think it sacrifices entertainment at a lot of points.
yeah, maybe that's it.
Because
Maybe
at the
that's
end of the
it.
day,
Yeah,
like people find different enjoyment in different things. But I personally like
exactly.
stories that have a good balance between their deeper meaning and their entertainment. I want to be both entertained by a film and take something away from it. I don't want to come
Right.
like I can, and if I were to separate them, I would take a movie that I enjoy, like a movie that like, I can say, yeah, this maybe have been like a critically 7 out of 10 thing, but I at least had the time of my life. I was laughing my ass off. I was having a great time. I was having fun. Because at the end of the day, the
Right, right.
difference is we call it entertainment for a reason. It's media
Hmm.
and entertainment, because the thing that differentiates entertainment from knowledge or learning or an essay or a lecture is that you
Exactly.
find critical and deeper meaning, and you take knowledge away from those things, but you're not going to like a lecture, for example, to get entertainment. At times it
Right.
felt
You're
like things
not.
like
You're not.
Akira and Evangelion, I think Ava again has a much better balance between entertainment and critical meaning than
Oh, very
Akira
much
and
so.
critical effect.
Yeah. Action scenes are amazing. Yeah.
But there are
Hmm.
more times like in Evangelion and Akira than like a lot of other things I've watched where my mindset was okay, I feel like I am kind of watching a video essay at points. I
Right.
don't want to say that. It's more so that it feels that it's trying. Like I felt that I was taking more of a it's so weird to explain, and I know some people would be like, "I'm stupid right now for saying this," but there were times where it felt like I just wanted to pass on a message to me rather than combine that message in with its entertainment at points. I think Evangelion, as I've said a million times in this podcast, does it way better. But with Akira specifically, I felt there were more times where it was trying to hand me that deeper meaning on a platter, but with no entertainment or no enjoyment on the side. I can look at Akira critically and say, yeah, this movie's solid. It was a good enough movie. It had some deeper meaning. It had
Hmm.
some deeper symbolism. But when I view it from an entertainment perspective, I'm like, for a lot of the movie, I was bored. I was like, I wasn't connected to the characters or the setting. And a lot of the
Yeah.
characters aren't like another thing with Evangelion and like Akira that share in common is that while I think Evangelion like has Misato and Asuka, apart from that, I don't really think many of the characters are likable. I respect them from a writing perspective, but I don't personally love Shinji as a person. I'm like, I don't love you as a
No.
person,
Yeah.
but I think you're a very, very, very well written character. Meanwhile, and
Exactly.
like
I agree
Akira's
with
the
that.
same with like Kaneda. I'm like, you're a cool character, but then I look at everyone else. I'm like, oh, I can respect that you're decently written, but I don't really like your personalities. I don't really like your designs. I don't really like, in general, I'm not the hugest fan of the post-apocalyptic setting. I think it did a lot better here than some other
Okay.
times. But I just felt
Yeah.
disconnected from these characters. I didn't relate to them, and I know you don't have to relate to a character to like them. I know that.
Or to appreciate them. Yeah.
I
I
understand that.
definitely agree with
I
that.
definitely agree
Yeah,
with
I
that. I
understand
like
that
a
as
lot
well.
of fucking
Mhm.
fucked up characters in anime. I don't relate to a lot of
Oh,
like
yeah. We know my list.
we don't relate to some of those characters, but they're enjoyable. I
Mhm.
didn't take that sense of enjoyment out of it, Akira. I took that sense of, oh, this is a critically well written film to an extent, but
Yeah.
it just didn't
Yeah.
overlap it with that entertainment for me, and that's why Akira just out of the movies like
Yeah, I definitely agree with
it didn't
that.
hit as
Akira
hard.
just did not have that hook for me. Maybe I'm monkey brain, it's possible, but
Maybe a
most
monkey
movies,
brain.
most movies I like to have that hook where it's like, okay, you have me. Now you can hit me with your
Yep.
deep symbolic meaning. Akira never really had me. I was kind of wanting to get in there, but they just never really grabbed me. And
That
so
was good
that's
though.
kind of my interpretation.
That
But
was good.
yeah, I guess we agree on Akira. Good, decent film, not terrible by any means. I enjoyed watching it more than I didn't enjoy watching it, so that's a W
Fair
for me
enough.
in a
The
movie.
movie on here that I think our opinions have changed the most on since our first time. With the other movies, I'd not seen them before. Forte had. He wanted a refresher. I wanted to see them for the first time. But this time, this movie, we had both seen, and we both wanted a refresher on. Koe no Katachi, A Silent Voice. My God. When I first watched this movie, solid film. When I watched it for the second time, good film. This time, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's that I'm at a different point in my life. Maybe it's that my viewing of stories in anime has drastically changed since the first time I saw it. But this movie hit me so much harder this time. I've never cried in this movie in my life, and I was crying like in 2 or 3 scenes. Like,
Yeah.
to quote my boy Forte, I ain't never cried a day in my life.
I've never cried a day in my life.
I've
but...
never cried a day in my life, but Ishida's development as a protagonist, honestly, top 5 protagonist for me now, I think. Genuinely a top 5 protagonist for me. Absolutely adore him. Shoko and Yuzu, adorable, precious. I love them to pieces. Ueno may be a bitch, but she had some good development. Miyako, Ishida's mother, great. Nagatsuka, ultimate Chad of a best friend. The animation, the music, the tone, the story this thing had to tell. The deep look at things like self-satisfaction and the psychology and ideology of bullying and impact that you can leave on other people in your life. Just, there was so much to this movie. I don't want to say it hit different, but it hit different.
It hit different. Mm-hmm.
The scene, like, a couple of scenes that come to mind, like the scene that I probably cried the most in is at the beginning of the movie. You have Ishida, he bullies Shoko, and then it leaves this very big scarring impact on them as people. Ishida's mother goes to Shoko's mother and begs her to forgive them and pays for all the damages that her son has caused. And then you see late and like a bit later that, so one of the things Ishida did is that he Shoko, I forgot to mention this if you didn't know, the entire point of A Silent Voice is that Shoko is a deaf girl. Shoko is deaf, she cannot speak, she cannot hear, but she is still the kindest, sweetest being ever. Ishida, though, being a dumb child, treated her like garbage, bullied her, treated her like trash, and would constantly rip out her hearing aids and would throw them away, and that cost a lot of money. So when the mother comes later and offers the money to repay for all of them, you see when she comes back later, her earring has been absolutely ripped outside of her ear and she is covered in blood. You can see that this, like, Shoko's mother had snapped. This woman, in general, like, yikes. Good, I don't even want to call her a good mother, but good character, but you could tell that she had gone in on this mother because she was so upset for what happened to her daughter. And then, it wasn't even that scene. Later in the film, when Ishida almost dies protecting Shoko, so when Ishida's mother comes, she gets on her hands and knees. One of the things that she gets on her hands and knees, and she's like, "Please forgive my son. Please take this money." Yada yada. And then the duality is later in the film when Ishida sacrifices himself to protect Shoko, and you think Ishida's dead. Shoko's mother comes to Ishida's mother and gets on her hands and knees and is like, "Please, please forgive my daughter. Please forgive us. Please." And I don't know what it was about that scene, but I sobbed. I started crying my eyes out. The duality between that at the beginning, because although Ishida, I don't know why no parent, no teacher did shit to stop him when he was younger, but you could tell this mother cared. She cared so much about her son. And you could tell this mother, the Shoko's mother, despite being, that bitch needs to have some anger management. You could tell that she cared so much about her daughter. And just seeing these two dualities, the duality between the mother at the beginning and the mother now, that shit broke me. Just in general, this movie, I don't even think I have too much to say about it. It's just phenomenal. The progression of the story, the development of Ishida as a protagonist, the inner look at things like psychology and self-satisfaction, and just this, it's so impactful. I'm going to say, absolutely, it is better than Your Name. I will probably get a lot of shit for this, but I think this movie, I don't want to say stomps Your Name, but this movie hit infinitely harder than Your Name for me. Just that, in general, I tend to like things that take that, I don't want to say deeper psychological look, but that more of an inner look in the mindset of people, and like justifying the actions of people, and that ideological and that psychological big digging up of, just that stuff hits different, bro. That shit hits different.
Yeah.
And this movie, it ticked my boxes. It ticked my boxes. Amazing character designs, amazing music, amazing voice acting. I want to give this movie a shot in dub as well, because I think bringing a deaf actress to play Shoko in the dub was actually a really, really cool thing. Definitely something you want to
Yeah,
support. And I know
yeah,
Robbie Damon, Forte's boy, voices
yes.
Shoya Ishida, and that's going to be.
My current favorite dub VA, although I haven't really gotten into VAs as much as Sam has. I'm slowly getting into them. Oh, it'd be cool if we had a podcast about VAs. That'd be pretty cool.
I know, right? I know, right?
But but yeah, I definitely yeah, to go off your point, Sam, I definitely agree. Originally I had your name above a silent voice, but I've recently I guess I put them on the same score rating, like on, Annie list and that kind of beat. But if I had to give a ranking, I would put a silent voice above your name. And I don't know what it was. I This was my second viewing of the film. The first time I obviously appreciated it for what it was. I really enjoyed the movie. I thought it was a great movie. But for some reason, this time watching it, like you said, I don't know if it's because I'm in a different state of mind. I've kind of changed as a person, or that I watched it with a very close group of friends as opposed to the first time I watched it by myself. But I don't know. Yeah, it really just hit different this time. I think the cool thing about A Silent Voice, which has been different than every other movie on this list, yes, is that it has no sci-fi element whatsoever. I'm not saying having sci-fi elements in your movies is bad or necessarily great, but there was no sci-fi element type conflict. It was very much just a coming of age story, and to me, it was actually a story of retribution, I guess, if I could say, or a story of forgiveness. I think is more of what I would like to say. Um, Ishida starts out, like you said, as a young kid being very much a bully, and there was just no one. The teachers who knew what was going on did not stop him, and he was just getting constant positive reinforcement for this behavior, so he continued to do it. Now, as we see Ishida grow up into a young man or a young adult, we know who he truly is as a person, who what his values actually are, and he feels very regretful for the way he's treated Shoko, so much so that in the beginning of the movie, he was very much going to just repay his mom for everything she had done for him, say sorry, and he was actually going to commit suicide, which was just a very, very, what should I say, hook way to start off the movie. Like you're immediately invested in this character because you see him as kind of like a brat, right? You think he's just a really mean kid, and then you see him grow up to the point that he feels so much pain and sorrow, not just because he was bullied after that, but because he feels so much pain and sorrow that he doesn't have a place in this world, and all the trouble he's caused his mom and his family, that he's going to pay her back and just commit suicide. Now, thankfully, he doesn't do that, but just to see how much he grew as a character, and I loved how there's this parallel between Shoko, who also turns out to be his love interest, as she is deaf and she has this disability, so she cannot hear the world around her. Right? She still has a way of communicating with people, and she very much wants to be a part of the world, very much wants to exist and make these long-lasting connections. That's why she's such a kind person, despite her having this disability that's plagued her since she was very, very young. How that complements Ishida's character. While he doesn't have a disability, he's been scarred since a child when he started being bullied, and also his regret that he's unable to see people. I love the way the film puts the X's over people to show that he hasn't formed a connection with that person, or that he's scared to interact with them. He doesn't feel like anyone will like him based off what he does, because it's like the old saying, it's impossible for you to love others or like others until you can love and like yourself. And Ishida, rightfully so, feels bad about what he did in the past, so he's unable to make those connections with other people because he doesn't feel like he is worth it. He doesn't feel like he offers anything of value. He doesn't feel like he belongs in this world. So he's unable to actually see people in the face, and he doesn't look at people in the face. He cannot see because he cannot form those connections. And by the end of the film, and I know I'm jumping to the end, but just for this comparison, this is the scene that made me tear up. Now, obviously, I've never cried a day in my life, but if I were to cry, it would be at that scene at the end when he's removing his hands from his ears. Not only can he finally see people, all the X's have dropped. He can see people, but he can actually hear the surroundings, the people's laughter. He finally actually feels not like an extreme outcast, but a part of the world. He feels like he's made these connections, and by that he also feels that he is of value, that he has something to offer, that he's not a terrible person. There's a scene in the movie where he starts singing part of a song, and some of the lyrics are, I believe it goes along the lines of even a monster has a heart, even a monster wants to feel, or something along the lines of that. And I definitely think that was referring to him. He sees himself as a monster, this bully, because he tortured this girl all throughout her elementary school or middle school experience, one of those, throughout her young school experience. And he feels like, rightfully so, that was not only the worst thing to do, but that he is a monster and that he doesn't belong. So to see him finally accept himself, forgive himself as others have forgiven him, especially Shoko, and to finally become a part of the world was the most beautiful thing I'd seen out of all of these movies. I could go on and on about this movie and gush about it, but it truly was kind of like Your Name in a sense, other than the sci-fi element. It was a story of empathy. It wasn't until Ishida was bullied that he truly understood Shoko. And it wasn't until he had these feelings of not belonging because of what he had done that he could truly understand Shoko, because she felt that she did not belong because she was different. She couldn't hear, and she so desperately wanted to form those connections as Ishida does in the film. So to me, this story, unlike all the other ones, well, the other ones do it too, but this story does it the best full circle I've ever seen in any of these movies. Ishida's character comes full circle, and you can see how his relationships grow and how he truly changes as a person. And he finally accepts himself and forgives himself as others have done for him. It's a beautiful film. I thought the romance element was on second viewing. I thought it was stronger than it was first viewing, because that was my initial gripe, that I wanted to see him like actually end up with Shoko at the end, right? I like actually confess love. I know she kind of does in the middle, and it's kind of brushed over because at that point Ishida, he doesn't even understand, because he's like, there's no way anyone could ever love me, right? So when when she confesses to him, it just goes right over his head. He thinks she's talking about the moon, which is kind of funny, but it also just shows his character that he just wasn't at that point in the film yet. But there is a manga, so I definitely want to read that to get the full experience. But yeah, I agree with you, Sam. It's easy 10 out of 10. I said it. It's peak fiction for me right now. Beautiful film. Uh, yeah, that's. I
I
guess I
think we've
gushed
said all
about
we
it
can
enough.
say about this movie.
Yeah,
We
Jeez.
just gushing about this shit,
Yeah,
man.
yeah.
We love this movie. This movie hit different,
It's
bro.
amazing. Yeah, it's amazing.
But
It's an
now
amazing
time
movie.
for some real peak fiction, bro.
Okay,
Time for
let's go.
some real peak fiction.
Hmm.
Pokemon, the first movie, Mewtwo strikes back. Let's go. Okay,
Hmm.
so I'm probably going to get a lot of smack for this, but Pokemon, the first movie, is fucking amazing. I do not think the Pokemon anime is phenomenal. I think it has some cool aspects to it. I think it has some cool fights and some decent characters. This is the only thing in the Pokemon anime, and one of only two things in Pokemon in general, I will say from a storytelling perspective, are masterful. The I've seen this movie a million times, dub, sub, whatever. I'm talking about the sub here, by the way. I'm going to make that very, very clear. The sub version of this
Hmm.
movie takes the dub version of this movie and shits on it. Shits on it, bro. Shits on it. The sub is just so much better, so much more ideologically and psychologically stimulating. There is so much more to this movie in the sub, so much more nuance, so much more depth, so much more genuine tragedy to this movie in Japanese than there is in the dub. And that's because of a lot of. I don't want to get into just rant about the dub, but 4Kids clearly did not give a shit about the original message of this movie. They changed things around, they moved things around, they put focus on different things in the movie. They had characters come to different revelations and different realizations, which aren't bad. They're not. It's not a bad movie. Just compared to the sub is a much, much, much better movie. I've seen this movie a million times, as I said, but I finally showed it to my boy Forte and some other friends, and I want to get
Hmm.
their opinions on this. I showed them everything, by the way, because to make it very clear, the first Pokemon movie is not just the movie itself. In Japan, to the 5 weeks leading up to the film, there was a radio drama series called The Birth of Mewtwo, which you've probably be like, oh, that's the thing with Amber and Mewtwo and like the backstory thing. That got dubbed later, but this is a much more in-depth look at that. That was a special that was made because of reasons that was a lot shorter than the actual dialogue within the radio drama. The radio drama has a lot more to it with backstory, with characters and motivations, so much more tragedy, so much sadder, so much more actual dialogue between characters like Mewtwo and I, or as she's known in the sub, Amber, uh, and Mewtwo and Giovanni. Mewtwo and the doctors, just the whole thing about Jesse's mother in the radio drama. Mm. So I'm going to ask you, Forte, Joshy boy, what did you think about the first Pokemon movie in Japanese compared to the dub?
So, right. So I had originally seen the dub a long, long time ago. I'm probably revealing my age here, but I own the VHS of the first Pokemon dub movie as well as the special that came after. That's still dealing with Mewtwo. I own those on VHS, but I really much enjoyed the Pokemon dub back in the day, but I had not seen the first movie of Pokemon since I watched it. Yeah, I'm sure I rewatched it like probably some point in middle school or something like that, but I hadn't seen it since then. So coming from the sub, I didn't know exactly what to expect per se with the changes. Sam has sort of alluded to me, kind of what the changes would be, but to actually experience it was definitely it hit different for lack of a
Mm.
better word, especially the radio drama. I definitely liked having that radio drama and that backstory, that full backstory of Pokemon the first movie. It made me resonate with Mewtwo so much more as a character. Now there's other reasons for that because of the dub and sub changes, but that made me resonate with Mewtwo so much more as a character. And I was particularly impressed with what they did with Jesse's mom Miyamoto and how her original want of helping her daughter and having enough money to raise her daughter because she's very much raising her as a single parent became an obsession with Mew. And as the
And
radio
in a
drama goes
sense,
on,
to just like gum off that, it's like Mew
yeah,
in this movie very much is a metaphor for God as a concept. As obviously within the world of Pokemon, there are lots of godly Pokemon, Pokemon like Arceus, Pokemon like Mew. So
mhm,
whenever these characters are obsessed with Mew, they're essentially obsessed with what this world views as the concept of God. And to just
right.
jump off you, it was not so much an obsession with just Mew as a Pokemon, but an obsession with reaching the heights of God itself. And
Right,
it's
exactly, to reaching the pinnacle of life. And you very much see that later on in the movie with the experimentation and why Mewtwo is created. But just seeing Jesse's mom, just as the radio drama, she basically says over and over, "Oh, I have to find Mew. I can't wait to find Mew." And it starts out, "I can't wait to have enough to take care of Jessie. She's very little right now, and I need help taking care of her." Time passes. Jesse's entering elementary school, and I'm sure she's going to need notebook and backpack. So I really need to find Mew. And then time passes. Wow, Jesse's probably in high school now. She's probably getting ready to find, a great mate. It'd be great if I could just afford a wedding dress for her. So I really need to find Mew. And then it goes on, I think, one more time, like that she's probably an adult right now. I need to find Mew so that I can come back to her. And you see that all this time has passed, and Miyamoto, Jesse's mom, is searching for Mew, reaching for the god, as Sam put it, which I think is a great way to push it, reaching for this desire. And she's giving this rationalization in her brain that she's doing all this for Jesse, but you see that time is just passing where she is not a part of Jesse's life because she's reaching from you and she's rationalizing in her brain that this is actually for Jesse when it's actually become an obsession. I thought that psychology was just super unsettling to me. That's one of the, like, even with the experimentation, which we'll talk about later, which was really really creepy, that was just super unsettling, just seeing her mental fortitude, if or what should I say,
mental
her
stability.
psychology, yeah, her her stability and her psychology just slowly changed, and her slowly, in my opinion, slip into obsession and depravity was super unsettling and super sad because the whole time Jesse, I remember now they mentioned in the Pokemon anime, Jesse mentions that her mom went on a mission and never came back, and so to have context for that is just, it was really cool, but it was also really sad for me,
And
especially
it puts a
uh,
lot into context and to reason when you realize
right.
why
Yeah.
Giovanni keeps
Why
these people
Giovanni
around.
keeps these clowns around, right?
It's probably
It's
that he feels
because
indebted to the mother because the mother was very close to Giovanni's mother, who at the time was the leader of Team
right.
Rocket.
And and it also helps Sakaki's character, or Giovanni. We're going to probably switch between sub and dub names, but Sakaki or Giovanni, because he's very much a very business practical man. He cares a lot about capitalism and consumerism, and he believes that it's important that Pokemon are used for tools. But that kind of even humanized him in a way. He very much loves his mother, as he portrayed in the radio drama, and to know that he has those connections with Team Rocket and values Jesse and James in that manner, and respect Jesse's mother in that manner and keeps them around out of
That's
respect. I think
assuming.
it's
Like
really
it's
cool.
just definitely
Yeah,
assuming that they keep
yeah.
him around
This
for
is
that
just
reason.
speculation. Yeah, it's just
We definitely know
speculation.
about the
But
mother, but
yeah,
like assuming with all the knowledge we know about how much he respects his mother and respects Team Rocket as a franchise,
right,
and just thinking why would he keep these three clowns around? Just think of it in the sense
right.
of perhaps he keeps them around because he feels indebted to the mother, because they have no clue. In general,
They
she's
have
like
no
off the
value.
grid. In general,
Right,
like
right, right.
they have no clue where Jesse's mother is. They just said she never came back. They
Never
have
came
no
back.
clue. So for all
They had
he
no
knows,
idea.
for all he could assume, she's dead. She's just
Hmm.
dead, and
Yeah,
he probably feels in a way indebted to her, and why he bothers keeping around Jesse, James, and Meowth, these absolute clowns who use millions
yeah.
of his dollars of money and shit it all up the bloody hole. Look,
And literally just lets them do their own thing, searching for Pikachu. Like, not like Pikachu's a super rare Pokemon or
like
anything.
he don't
I
give
know
a shit
Ash's
about no
Pikachu is
Pikachu.
strong, but he's like, I don't care about Pikachu. I'm trying to get a Mewtwo, so just get out of my way. Just do your own thing. I'll keep you around because Jesse's mom was. I feel something there, whatever that is, but that's all just speculation, of course. The Mount Fuji, Mr. Fuji, and his daughter. That was really sad and also super unsettling. The fact that he's cloned his daughter just over and over, trying to hopefully get it to the point where she could live past being a young child and outside the test tube, and why he wanted to research cloning Mew and what ends up being Mewtwo. Because of his desire to actually bring back his dead daughter. Is she died in a car accident?
Yes,
Is
car
that right?
accident, and he
Car
clearly
accident.
blames himself. In general, like in the
Right. I
dub,
believe
it's
he was
very
driving.
much like
Yeah.
in the dub they really don't touch on this, but in the sub, you very much feel this I don't want to say this weight, but this overarching theme of a very large theme of all the characters in this movie. Miyamoto, Jesse's mother, Dr. Fuji, Giovanni, Mewtwo himself is very much
Hmm.
trying to reach this pedestal or this level of God itself, chasing after this untouched subject, this untouched being that obviously God, and in this case Mew, which is the
Right.
God of this world and the one who gave birth to all life, is this unattainable and unreachable concept. And to see these people
Right.
constantly sacrifice everything and sacrifice their families, their homes, their sanity, and Fuji lost his wife in the process to just chase
Yeah.
after these unattainable lofty goals of reaching the levels of God. And then
God. Right.
it puts it all into perspective when like Mewtwo is finally created. Mewtwo's first question when he comes out of the tube is, Mew, is that my mother? Is that my father? To which Fuji replies, you could say yes, but you could also say neither. Mewtwo then asks, then was it God who created me? Was I created by God? And Fuji just replies, the only things that can create life are humans and gods. And to see to see how this character, like that may seem, oh, that's just like a really generic statement. When you think about it in a weird sense, not even a weird sense, when you just think about it a bit more, he's putting humans and putting himself on the same level and pedestal as God. He believes at that
Right.
point that he has performed the undoable. He has created a living, breathing clone of what is the God in this world. His
Right.
team, his humans have made their own God. Thus, and then he sits and compares himself and says humans and gods are on the same level of creation. They are on the same level of power. Humans and gods are equals now. We clearly, in his mind, he clearly believes that I have created the clone of Mew, the strongest, rarest, godliest Pokemon. I have created God itself, and I am on the same level as God. And when you see this, like, the fucked up shit and the amount of times that he's trying to play God by bringing his daughter back to life in these test
Over and
tubes,
over.
hundreds
Yeah.
upon probably hundreds of times,
Hundred. It had to have been hundreds of times.
had to have
Yeah.
been hundreds of times. And
Hmm.
the mental strain, he lost his wife in the process because she left and she's like, you've gone insane. And then to see the backstory with her and Mewtwo and how they were able to connect to each other as clones, and they're like how they were able to discuss all the things about life and just being humans, and then just Mewtwo, like you get this big sense of Mewtwo, and then you realize Mewtwo doesn't remember who she is. He just like the big thing about it is that she, like, one of her
Right.
final clones dies, but he is forced to forget everything about her, but is kept with the emotion. So he wakes up essentially a child who is waking up feeling the hole in his heart of losing the most important thing in his life. He has no clue who, though.
Exactly.
He has no clue how. All he knows is there was this person who taught him these values. One of the big things, like one of the big changes between the dub and the sub, is that in the dub, to explain the Pokemon tears, they have that the Voyager tell the story about the winds of water, or
That's so weird.
The magical Pokemon tears brought back the humans from life. And then obviously we have the iconic scene at the end where the Pokemon's tears bring back Ash to life. In the original Japanese version, that ties into the last thing I said instead. Amber, when Amber dies, she says, "Thank you for your tears, the Mewtwo." But at the end of the day, the only things that can feel sadness or shed tears in terms of emotional pain are humans. Living creatures can only shed tears outside in terms of physical pain. When they're hurt, when they're shedding blood, when they are on the when they she didn't say all these things, but it was like when a physical thing, when a creature feels pain, that is the only time they can react. About what humans can do that is separate from every other creature is that they have the ability to shed tears when it comes to emotional pain. So Mewtwo convinces himself, am I a human? Am I a Pokemon? I am clearly shedding tears right now out of sadness. Am I a Pokemon? Am I a human? Or am I neither? And then you have this
Right.
like I know I overhype this character. I don't even overhype. I know I talk about this character a lot, but there's just so much more to him than there is at face value. And I think the dub, one of the things that it does is that it turns Mewtwo into a character that should be taken at face value, and I don't like that. I think Mewtwo is a lot more nuanced, and his development and reasoning and motivation and the sadness and the pain and the torture that he was forced to go through. Then you have the amazing conversation between him and Giovanni, where Giovanni tells him simply, no matter how strong you get, you will not be as strong as humans. You will not be as strong as this dominant life form. Then when he serves under Giovanni, like one of my favorite quotes in the entire movie, and one of my favorite quotes in all of anime in general, is that Giovanni looks at Mewtwo and says, all you have to do is what humans do. And he's like, what do humans do then? And then Giovanni just puts it simply, destruction, war, and conquest. And it's like, it's obviously that's a really generic villain line, but when you put in the case of humanity, throughout the history of humanity, a lot of it is based on destruction, war, conquest.
And conquest.
It's what a lot of human history is based on. And this development of this character Mewtwo and the fortification of his psychology. In the sub, you have more things about like another big thing, another big dub change is that Mewtwo in the dub hates humans because they created him and wanted to turn him into a slave. In the original, it's not said that he hates humans as a species. He hates humans as they stand right now as a race. He believes that humans are incapable of leading the world. His mindset is, it's not I dislike humans as a species because they smell. It's I dislike humans as a species because I believe that they are going to send everything into ruin. They put themselves on these absolutely high pedestals and believe they have this absolutely controlling and full understanding of the word power and the definition of power, when in actuality they just put meaningless need and things like money and greed and prioritize those and confuse the meanings of power and greed and the definitions of like money and all these things and put them all as one concept, when that's not what Mewtwo believes how the world's genuine definition of the word power goes. You have much more certain like nuanced things. Like in the original, Mew is not the good guy. Mew, when Mewtwo asks why are you here, it just says downright real, we are going to win. In the dub, they change it to, Mew wants to say you should fight from the heart and be good and be noble. That didn't exist in the original, and it makes Mewtwo seem way more of a villain. Like, what are some other changes that just come to mind? Like, Mewtwo, and there's a scene in the original where Mewtwo opens the doors and is like, I have no intention of killing any of you. You are set free. That is if you can make it through the storm. It's like, and then in the dub they change it to, humans, you have served my purpose. I will spare your lives for the moment. And it's like, and then people will be like, no, those scenes are exactly the same. He's still threatening to kill him. No. In the original, it's literally saying, it's trying to prove to them, as you said, Forte, like when we were watching yesterday, it's not a matter of, I'm going to kill you in the storm. It's trying to prove, you only got here because of your Pokemon. You humans call yourselves...
They know...
Go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off. It's more like you said that in the beginning when Mewtwo's first born, the humans are very much comparing themselves to gods. Like, only gods and humans have the power to create. Humans are above Pokemon. Even Sakaki / Giovanni says that. So when Mewtwo in the sub opens the doors and says, you guys are free to go if you can, at that point he has stripped them of their Pokemon to say that you are actually powerless. You are nothing without your tools. And he also displays Pokemon because he says you guys are also bad, because why would you ever serve humans? that are beneath us. Why would you do that? They
It's
have
not that
no
they're beneath
power on
us.
their own.
It's that humans should not
Yeah,
like have power in
it
general.
should not enslave Pokemon, quote unquote, or they shouldn't even have this power, but for you siding with them. Because he even says that Ash's Pikachu is a fool for saying that that's a mutually beneficial relationship. Because in Mewtwo's eyes, he doesn't see it that way. So for him to like open the doors and say, "Yeah, go for it," but I know you can't, and no one goes for it because they can't. There's no way they could ever get there without their Pokemon,
In the
and the
dub,
movie
it's
makes it
just
clear
I'm
from the
gonna kill
beginning.
you. In the dub, it's
Yeah,
just I'm gonna kill you. In the sub, he opens the doors and he's like, I won't kill you,
the weather
but the
will.
weather will. It's like you were only able to
Exactly.
get here because of your Pokemon. Yet all you humans constantly go. It's a matter of all you humans constantly going about how strong and powerful you are, but you're only able to get here because of your Pokemon, and you can't
And
get back
Mewtwo
without your Pokemon.
manufactures the storm for that reason, to prove that point. He's a freaking mad lad.
In the fucking
But
yeah, in the
yeah.
dub, he wants to use the storm to kill the world. In the sub, he literally just uses it
Hmm.
as a test for the trainers to prove who's like actually worthy and like not even worthy, who's actually capable of actually powering
Getting there.
through. And just like
Hmm.
differences in this, like in general, Mewtwo's issues with humanity lie as a concept, lie with their definitions of the word power, how they compare themselves to gods, how humans. I don't want to insult like obviously all the people out there, but there are definitely humans in this world and like large quantities who think humans are invincible. We are the supreme life
Right.
form. Nothing is smarter than us. Nothing is stronger than us. There is nothing greater than us. And like one
Hmm.
day something could come and bite our asses and be like, oh shit. Mewtwo
Yeah.
realizes these flaws with the like actual status quo of humanity and points them out. But people are just so used to the status quo and so in tune with what they've been raised and what they believe to be correct and what like how in this world even with these pocket monsters, these magical creatures that are able to
Hmm.
shoot fire out of their head and do all this shit, humans
Yeah.
still believe they are the supreme life form. People
Yeah. They're
still believe that they are the strongest and they are the most capable of leading this world. And Mewtwo
right.
is like, no, you are not the most capable of leading this world. Or and
They're.
go ahead.
Oh yeah. No, you can finish. I
I'm
just
just
have.
saying, like Mewtwo says,
Yeah.
like straight up, like you are not capable. The more you
Hmm.
continue down this path, you are going to destroy this world. You are going to
Exactly.
bring this world to destruction and ruin. So I will take it in my hands. It's not because Pokemon are more capable. They let you get to this point. It's not even that I am more capable because I am the strongest. It is I am capable because I am the only one clearly who has realized this. It is I
Right.
am like it is not oh I'm the strongest Pokemon, I need to rule the world, it's my right, my destiny. In the original it's I think I'm more capable than you guys because I clearly am realizing all these just in my opinion obvious flaws with society and with humans as a species and as a concept that no one acts on, and yet you people still, people like Giovanni and the doctors who created them, and even people like Ash to an extent, still believe that they are the strongest ones. Like Ash, like obviously
Exactly.
doesn't sit and like try and like show his power off to like everyone, being like I'm the evil one, but still, Ash still fights for humanity, and Ash is still like I think humans are very much capable, and that's not to say they're
Yeah.
not. Like, and then you have, but Mewtwo is like, okay, like you guys constantly prove that you are going to send this world into ruin, and there are just so many more
Right.
nuanced things to his character. Like you just change his motivation from, in general, as the director of the movie once said, you change the message from a message about existentialism into a movie about anti-racism, and it cuts corners and shoots down things about his character, and even compare, like even when you're not comparing it to the dub, it's obviously a better movie than the dub. Like most people would agree on that. But I think even as a actual standalone movie and as a standalone character, Mewtwo is phenomenal. Even as like a movie, I could actually hear an argument for why it's not a great, like not the most perfect movie. Because like as
Hmm.
like Forte said, it felt a bit quick at times. Some things were a bit rushed. Ash them didn't do a massive
Right.
amount. But Mewtwo as a character, I believe is phenomenal. And then you have the great like to just touch on Mewtwo Returns is not a movie, so we'll just touch on it a bit. You have that great conclusion to his character where like in that's one of the problems with the dub as well. In the dub, Mewtwo's realization or revelation is that these Pokemon are perfectly equal. These Pokemon are on equal footing and exactly the same. But then proceeds to go into hiding away from other Pokemon, away from society, because he believes they're not equal. And it's like, okay. In the sub, his revelation's a lot different. His revelation is, despite the fact we are not equal, we both deserve life. And then in Returns, his revelation is, it's not just that we both deserve life. It's like you have the big like metaphor in that movie about the sunlight and the moonlight, and it's maybe it's not just that we deserve our place in the world. Maybe we deserve to walk in the same place of the world as these others. Maybe we too deserve to walk under the same sunlight as these Pokemon do, rather than always being in the moonlight. And you have these other, like, you just have this great conclusion to his character where he becomes this much more, in returns, he's a lot more calm, he's a lot more down to earth, he's a lot more knowledgeable, he's a lot more fair, he's a lot less, I want to say angsty, but a lot less full of disdain. It's very much just, in general, he holds himself responsible for bringing these clones into the world, and he's like, at that time, I was no better than these humans, but I feel that it's my job now to protect them and make sure that they do not get hurt. But then he realizes as more time goes on, maybe what I'm doing right now isn't protecting them. Maybe I'm just being selfish and forcing them to be here to convince myself I'm protecting them. And then he lets them go. And he moves on and has his great conclusion to his character, which Journeys looks like it's going to be fucking up. But in general, just like, I could go on for hours about the psychology of Mewtwo as a character, his backstory with I and Giovanni, his motivations being so vastly different in the sub and the dub, the nuance to his character, just, a lot of people be like, oh, it's still just a Pokemon movie. I think Mewtwo, compared to some other antagonists in anime, is genuinely amazingly done. One of my favorite anime antagonists, no questions asked, and I've seen...
Yeah, to touch on that point, I just really love that the sub, I mentioned this to you, the sub changed his motivations from the dub. The dub was very much a movie about vengeance in Mewtwo, and it was very much on the surface level. I didn't like being experimented on, I didn't like being created, and you humans think you're better than Pokemon, and I'm going to prove you wrong. But in the sub, I like that his motivation was very much a journey of existence. My place in the world, where do I belong? One of my favorite things about the sub as well as the radio drama is the conversation he has with I, where he's asking, am I a Pokemon or a human? And basically, I tells him, well, of course, he doesn't remember this conversation because his memories are wiped, but I tells him that it doesn't matter. The important thing is that you live as who you are, that you exist in the world.
But then on top of it, like, to give credit to, like, Mewtwo even then, like, I is just like, are you a human? Are you a Pokemon? I don't know. And then proceeds to follow it up with saying humans are the only ones that can shed tears. And it's like, just these, it's so good. So, like...
Yeah, it's so good. And I like that when Mewtwo is first introduced as well. When he's first introduced as Ash and Company, he calls himself the most powerful trainer. He doesn't introduce himself as a person. He doesn't introduce himself as a Pokemon. He introduces himself as a trainer. And earlier, he has this great dialogue with Sakaki or Giovanni where he's said, kind of monologuing to himself in his head, that I don't like Team Rocket. But it's not just Team Rocket. All humans seem to be about greed and conquer and conquest and all those things that Sakaki and Giovanni said they were about and all the things they've proven themselves to be about. And he asks Giovanni, what am I to you? And Giovanni says, you're a Pokemon. And he's like, well, what is a Pokemon? You're a tool. You're just to be used by humans. And he has this powerful message where he's decided he doesn't like humans. He's not that. Giovanni has told him that he's a Pokemon, and by being a Pokemon, that must mean he's a tool, and he's just to be used by humans. So he immediately says, well, I'm neither Pokemon nor human, or I'm neither human nor Pokemon. He immediately leaves, destroying Team Rocket's base. And then he meets Ash and Company and the other people there, and he introduces himself as the most powerful trainer in the world, basically.
One of the big things about Mewtwo's characters as well, just sorry to interject, but one of the big things about Mewtwo's character as well is that his entire existence throughout the movie, very little things that you don't really notice, are just attacks on the status quo of Pokemon as a franchise. At the time, like, to just, like, the trainer thing, like, leads into that. At the beginning, when you see him beat an Alakazam at the time, the strongest type was the Psychic type. It was feared. It was the greatest and most OP type in the games, and the anime was spoken of as this amazing, unbeatable type. Mewtwo beats it in one hit. He turns Dragonite. Like, Dragonite, the most big, powerful, legendary Pokemon at the time. Like, this big beast of destruction that we've only seen in, like, that one episode of the anime where he just is, like, walking around that giant Dragonite. His first on-screen appearance, apart from that, is Mewtwo turns the most powerful Pokemon, other than himself, really, into a delivery man. He turns, like, he takes... other things.
That Dragonite.
He, as you said, he introduced himself as a trainer. Him being a Pokemon that can talk is against the status quo. Him being a Pokemon that's a Pokemon trainer is against the status quo.
Exactly.
And one of the big ones that's a massive attack on the viewer is that one of the unspoken rules of the anime is that Ash's Pikachu will never ever go in its Pokeball. That is one of the big unspoken rules. It is a rule that every character, every antagonist, every person before and since has had to obey. It is something that just, it is a lore of the show, is essential, a lore of that universe. Mewtwo, in a matter of seconds, puts him in a Pokeball. That is not
Hmm.
just, oh, Mewtwo's really strong, but it's attack on the viewer, and it's attack on the viewer's perception. Things like that
Right.
don't, like, it's attack on the mechanics of the universe. I use a character like
Hmm.
Kokichi from Danganronpa as like a perfect example. A lot of things Kokichi does, while they may just seem, oh, that was funny, when you think about it, it's really, really important for his character because he doesn't just attack the characters in the story. His lies and his things reach out to the viewer by attacking game mechanics themselves. You know exactly what I'm
Right.
talking about, Forte.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
He attacks and manipulates mechanics of the game, the video game itself. He manipulates
Hmm.
mechanics of the video game in a way that no other character has done before or since. Mewtwo does
Hmm.
essentially a similar thing, and things like that may get like overlooked, but that is a really important thing. It
Right.
shows to this viewer that obviously, as a viewer, you feel that you are above the characters in the story. That is just the
Hmm.
truth. These are characters in their fictional world, and you are the reader reading in their world. The entire perception and everything that happens in the story is decided by your opinion, your perception, and your mindset attached to this. And as a viewer, you are led to believe throughout this entire time, where you've just become used to it as a viewer, Ash's Pikachu will never go in its Pokeball. Dragonite is
Right.
the most powerful Pokemon. I think this very powerful Pokemon, legendary, amazing thing. Psychic type is one of the most strong types, and Mewtwo beats a Psychic type in one hit. Turns the strongest Pokemon into a delivery man that we never see again. And then puts one of the unspoken rules of this universe. Ash's Pikachu will never go in its Pokeball. He puts it in its Pokeball, and this proves that Mewtwo is both larger than the characters in the story, and his presence is even larger than the viewer's perception of the story. And things like that are
Exactly.
really, really important. He attacks both the
Yeah.
status quo of the characters in the story, pointing out flaws and like holding Pokemon, and these people chasing the concepts of gods and the standards of humanity in general, and attacks the viewer's perception of said world, and even the viewer's perception of things in their own world. Things about
Hmm.
humanity, like putting this power and conquest and war and destruction. He attacks that. He attacks your just accepted mindset that Ash's Pikachu will never go in its Pokeball. He attacks that in a matter of seconds. It's like, no, nothing even the viewer can expect is something off limits for this Pokemon. Is off limits for, in the story, this creature that was created to stand on the same pedestal as or above God itself. And that is just super,
Hmm.
super cool and super unnoticed and super untouched. And it's one of those things that not many people will always notice or take into mind. But things like that are really, really big in storytelling. And when you notice it,
Yeah.
it really just proves the size and stature of a character. Another example is Aizen in Bleach. Obviously, in anime in general, OST is
Hmm.
a thing. We all have our soundtrack. There is just, it's the
I know
characters,
where you're
obviously.
going. Yeah.
Obviously, the soundtrack is just an accepted standard of the show. It is accepted standard. It is there. It is on screen. The characters obviously can't interact with it. You probably don't think it's happening at the time. It's just something there for the viewer. Aizen, in a matter of seconds, when the protagonist, Ichigo, the person who had just gained Bankai, just done made all these big reveals, charges at Aizen. Aizen stops him with one finger and stops the OST. That may just seem like, oh, that's cool, but that's really big. Like, that's a really big piece of storytelling because this proves that every single expectation, what yet again, and every single accepted standard that you've had of this story is being overtaken and overshadowed and outdone by this one antagonistic character. This character is both bigger than the characters in the story and the viewer who views it. He can control an aspect of the story that should not be able to be controlled by the characters, but not in a way that it's like, oh, he's breaking the fourth wall, but just his actions in the story are enough to seep into our world and attack our actual expectations and perceptions from a meta perspective. Mewtwo does a very
Right.
similar thing. And things like
Yeah.
that get very
And
unnoticed in this character. And as you said, like as
well,
him as being the strongest trainer, things like that are like I
right.
really appreciate this character and think he's really,
And
really
even
well
one of the
written.
characters, yeah, and even one of the characters says they're like, a Pokemon can't be a trainer, and it's like, well, insert meme. Well, who decided that, basically? And I just love that Mewtwo introduces himself as a trainer, and it's us that assumes that trainers must be human because of what we experience with Pokemon. And it's like you say, Mewtwo just broke every status quo. And one last thing that I thought was really, really good in the movie, I mentioned in the last podcast when we did underrated characters how much I love when anime tries to tackle real world issues. I
Mm-hmm.
mentioned with Aragaki and Graham Aker how I thought they did a great job of discussing PTSD and how it affects a character's psychology, and that kind of deal. I feel like I don't want to say Pokemon was necessarily ahead of its time because I don't think it was the first piece of media to ever go into cloning. Certainly not. I know it came out in '98, and I think we had our first animal clone of Dolly the sheep in the early 2000s. I want to say like '05, but don't quote me on that. It was the early 2000s. We cloned our
I think
first
it was
animal sheep.
99 or 2000. I think it was 99 or
Okay,
2000.
okay, okay. So it was like early 2000s, or maybe even a year after this movie was released, which was be pretty cool. What I loved what they did is they tackled the issue of cloning. Obviously, the issue with cloning in the media was that it would be like humans playing God. If you were very religious, you didn't believe in cloning, and obviously we already addressed that issue. But what I really, really enjoyed was when Mewtwo is having his conversation with I. The deal with I is unable to live past. I guess I should call her I2, which is the name that she's given because she's very much a clone of the original I, who was Dr. Fuji's daughter. She passes away because these clones can't live outside the test tube, and they also only live to like not past elementary age. She's He's having this conversation with I, and he's had many conversations with I, and they've bonded over the years that Mewtwo has been growing as well as I has been growing, and I passes away. And Dr. Fuji at this point says, well, as long as I have the base, being the DNA of the original I can make as many eyes as I want. And Mewtwo says, but it will never be the same I. It won't be the I that I'm crying over now. It won't be the I that I've had all these conversations with. It won't be that person who I've made this connection with. And that's the idea of cloning, that it's the nature versus nurture. You could clone me and make another Forte/Joshua, but it wouldn't be the same person. It doesn't have the experiences I've had. I guess just shouldn't say it. He doesn't have the experiences I've had. He will make his own experiences.
And then
And they
Mewtwo
showed,
proves, like, even, sorry to interrupt again, but
yeah,
Mewtwo
yeah,
proves
yeah,
that even, like, apart from that scene, even in the future, that he, like, the whole thing is that these humans believe they're the strongest, and that they were able to do these cloning things and had all these failed attempts in a matter of months. And in, like, a matter of years. They spent years and years, obviously. Obviously, we know
right,
Fuji spent years. Mewtwo perfected, the cloning thing in a matter of months, probably. A matter of
yeah,
weeks,
yeah,
even. And that just proves, yeah, you humans thought you were, like, obviously the hot shit here, but look. Literally
right.
look. Literally look. I was able to perfect this in a matter of months versus you versus in a
Mhm,
matter of years. And continue with what you were
right.
saying.
Oh yeah, and I was just gonna say to even go further with that point. You think of Team Rocket as very much being comic relief and joke characters, but it was very important that Meowth is cloned because the deal with Meowth is he has this whole backstory where he learned how to speak English because he wanted to impress a lady Meowth, which what a chat, right? But he also wanted to better himself as a Pokemon essentially. And the important thing is, in the beginning of the movie, he's immediately cloned by accident. The Meowth that comes out of there doesn't come out speaking English. It's a normal Meowth that speaks in Pokemon language or Meowth language, if you will. And that just goes on to the further point of cloning. That Meowth would never be the same as the talking Meowth because that Meowth did not have the same experiences, didn't have the same background of wanting to learn English, and hasn't learned English yet. Now, whether he has the capability or not, I would assume so. If Meowth could do it, why would the clone not be able to? Because the clones are not lesser, they want to exist in the world just like the regular Pokemon. But I just thought it was very important that Pokemon
Mm-hmm.
tackled the idea of cloning and people's perspectives of it and how there's a difference between nature and nurture, that you cannot clone a person exactly. You can only clone someone biologically, but that person will be different from the original because they have different experiences. They've had made different friends along the way, et cetera, et cetera. It will never be the same person. Cloning doesn't mean I make an exact copy. It only means I make an exact copy physiologically and biologically, but you can't change someone's psychology. Experiences are what shape us as well as our biology and our nature versus
Absolutely.
nurture. Yeah, so I love that. I love that Pokemon tackled that
And then
issue.
on top of
It's
just the
very
cloning
subtle,
thing,
but
yeah, on top of even the
yeah.
cloning thing, they just cover like in the dub. Like to give credit to the dub, I don't like obviously that they change one message to the other, but in the dub they cover racism. They want to go anti-racism, and then you have Meowth's great speech
Hmm.
and Meowth's great quote, and in the sub you have that much more thing where it just covers even more than just cloning. In that you have
Yeah,
existentialism, where you fit in the world, where like actually questions the confines of humanity and if we truly do stand at the top, and if we will never ever be outsurpassed and outdone. You have questions about Mewtwo and these clones of where they fit in this world and if they truly deserve to walk under the same sunlight as these other Pokemon and these other naturally born beings. And just this
right,
great questioning of where do I fit in the world? What justifies my place in this world? And what makes it okay for me to
right.
essentially exist? What justifies my
What does it
existence?
mean? Yeah, what does it even mean to
Like
exist? It's
one of the other
great.
big
Yeah.
changes in the dub versus the sub is that the dub's thing is that it says fighting is wrong, fighting can be fine, but not like this.
Hmm.
In the sub, it's not even that's not the message at all. The sub is the message of creatures shouldn't have to fight to prove their existence. No creature should
No.
have to right to prove that they have to exist. Whether they're fake,
Yeah.
whether they're clones, they are all living beings. They
Exactly.
all are living, and that's all that matters. It doesn't matter what
Yeah.
experiences they have. It doesn't matter how they were born. All that matters is that they were living. In the dub, obviously, like I think it's kind of like a similar message, but still, you lose that thing where it's the sub says literally, living creatures will never give up their territory to those of their same those
Hmm.
of their same species. And but these creatures, although they are fighting, shouldn't have to fight to prove they exist. It's not that
Right.
fighting in general is wrong, or even fighting to this extent. It's that fighting to prove that you deserve to exist is something that no living thing should ever have to do. Meanwhile, in the
Right.
dub, they kind of simplify it to fighting is wrong, and these characters and these Pokemon shouldn't be fighting in this way. And
Hmm.
just,
And the movie, the Mewtwo movie and the special keep shoving in your face too, which I think is great. That these clones are very much living things. When Ash turns to stone, Pikachu starts crying. It's not just the original quote unquote Pokemon that cry. It's also the clones that show this emotion and cry. In the special, they show that procreation is possible for the clones as well. And Meowth touches on that. That the parents of, I think it was a baby Nidoqueen or a Nido,
it was a
I
Nido
guess.
Queen. It was a Nido Queen for
Yeah,
some reason, and a
yeah, Nido.
Rhyhorn.
Yeah, that was really weird. I was like, wait, what? And I thought I missed, but yeah, either way, it doesn't matter. The baby Nido Queen in this case, parents were clones, but one of the basic things of life is being able to procreate for, most living mammals and other things like that. I won't go
Mm-hmm.
too sciencey, but it was a basis of life that they were able to produce more life, living life. They keep shoving in your face that although they're clones, they are living creatures with emotions and they have just as much of a right to exist and they should exist in this world. And that's the idea of Mewtwo was tackling. And do I have a right to exist? Who am I? Why am I here? And the question is yes. You're a living creature with everyone else, and you have every right to exist as much as the original Pokemon or the original Mew does. You belong here just as much as any other Pokemon. I think it's just a great message that the dub, yeah, it kind of loses out on because it kind of goes more the racism, right? But it's still there. I just like the way the sub tackled it a little more. I
Same,
definitely agree with that.
same.
Yeah. But watching this movie more recently as I'm older definitely gave me a much more positive appreciation for it, as well as watching the sub over the dub. I appreciate it a lot more. I appreciate Mewtwo's character much, much more. I just, like I said, I like him being more of a questioning character and on a quest for existence rather than vengeance. I think it's a much more powerful message, and it's one more people can relate to. I think we've all had that
Oh
question of
yeah.
what's my purpose in life? What am I going to accomplish? What do I offer to society? I've never been like, well, I can't wait to take over the world. I mean, that's just not very relatable, right? But I think we've all asked the question of, even if not from the perspective of a higher power, we've all said, what is my purpose here? What do I offer to society? What will I accomplish? Am I making an impact on someone else's life? And I just think that's a beautiful message. And it came from Pokemon of all things. You just don't think of it in Pokemon, but Pokemon hits different sometimes.
In
It just
general,
does. I
like
don't.
I don't, as I said, I
Yeah.
don't think the Pokemon anime is masterful or anything, but I think this is
Yeah.
something. I genuinely think this is a movie that should be viewed on the same level as some other pieces of anime media, because I genuinely think it is a
I agree.
genuinely really good movie with some really deep messages, as long as you give it the chance to actually think about them in a deeper sense, rather than just going in thinking this is a Pokemon movie, taking everything at face value and being really stupid about it. I think if you
Exactly.
actually give it a chance and actually, like as we've said, ironically enough, the movie we've talked about the most on this podcast is a Pokemon movie. And I think
Yeah,
that just
yeah. I didn't expect that, but
I
yeah, the more I think about it, the more I appreciate it
I
too.
think it's just one of those things that
Yeah.
it was such a big part of everyone's childhood, and to see it in this different light, like to me especially, I adore Mewtwo as a character. Potentially my second or
Right.
third favorite antagonist in all of anime. I adore this character, but
And for me personally, it's like I've grown up with the movie, or the
oh,
movie has
same,
grown up with me. It's like I
same.
had this opinion of Mewtwo is awesome, is my favorite psychic type Pokemon, to now seeing Mewtwo of how do I fit into society? What do I offer? What is my right to exist here? I think everyone can relate to that. So just growing up with this movie and the movie also growing up with me, I think that's great. That's a movie for the ages that you can grow up with.
Yep,
I mean, I don't want
same.
to over like, what should I say? I don't want to like, over glorify Pokemon the first movie, but I just think it does so many things well that I can even talk about it in this perspective now that I'm, much older. So it's a great movie.
Great
I'm glad I
movie.
got to see it in the sub.
Okay, then. I think that's what we said. And now we need to finish with our rankings and our ratings of
Oh,
all of the movies from this podcast.
Oh goodness.
We're gonna go from bottom to top. My number. So we watched 5 movies, right? Five,
Yep, 5 movies in 5 days.
5 movies in 5 days. At
That's pretty
number
awesome.
5, we have Akira. Akira, as we said, I think Akira for me didn't hit as hard as others. Still solid 7 out of 10 movie. Number 4 was Your Name. Really good movie, but again,
Hmm.
said my thoughts on it. 8.5 to 9 out of 10 movie. Then at number 3, Weathering with You. Weathering with You, solid 9 out of 10 movie. Really, really sweet. Really, really good movie. Really great characters. Number 2 is A Silent Voice. A Silent Voice hit different, bro. Solid 10 out of 10, bro.
Yes,
And then
sir.
we have Pokemon, the first movie at number 1. There are so many people who are going to scream and say shit. Fair enough. This movie just means everything to me. It obviously has that childhood factor to me, and obviously has that emotional factor to me.
Hmm.
Critically, I will give 2 scores for this one. Critically, 8.5, 9 out of 10 movie. I genuinely believe that Mewtwo is an
Okay. Yeah.
8.5 to 9 out of 10 character. Emotionally and entertainment value, though, 2,000 out of 10. This movie has grown up with me. I have grown up with it. My perceptions on things are like the exact same as Forte. Mewtwo's such a cool character, such a cool Pokemon, one of
Hmm.
my favorites. Into this is genuinely one of the most impactful characters in my life, and there are certain characters in fiction who have left that impact on me, and Mewtwo, ever since I saw the sub, has definitely been one of those characters. All 5 movies, all really good movies in their own right. Well, 4 amazing movies, and then Akira, which
Well,
I
yeah.
liked Akira enough, but I liked all 5 of these movies. Now, Forte, what's your scoring
All
and
right.
rating?
Oh, this is actually gonna be hard. I feel like my list, like the more I've talked about the movies, my list has changed since we started the podcast. But I guess that means it was a good discussion, good
Hell yeah.
podcast. Imagine people changing each other's opinions on the internet.
I know,
Could
right?
not be me.
Could not be
But
me.
I'm gonna agree with you and put Akira at the bottom. I'm gonna give it a 7.5, which once again, that's not a terrible score because 5 would be like this is okay. So above that is above average. I think Akira, like you said, it didn't have that hook for me and it didn't resonate with me, but I appreciate what it did. For all the reasons we mentioned earlier. So I'll put Akira at 5 for 7.5. I think at fourth, I'm going to put Weathering with You, because mostly because of Hodoka. I think,
Fair
um,
enough.
I I think that's it for the most part. Yeah, I mean, it was pretty much like Your Name. There was a romance, there was a conflict, there was character development, and there were friends we made along the way that helped us out, quote unquote. Now I'm just touching on it lightly, but I just felt like I appreciated Taki a little more than Hodoka, so I will put it at number 4 here. And
What was your score for
as far
Weathering with
as
You? What was your
yeah,
score?
as far as score, I'd probably give it. I want to give it like an 8.5. I think.
Fair enough. 8.5.
I think I'm gonna give it like 8.5 to a 9. There's some range there. Third place. Gosh, this is gonna be tough. I kind of third place. Third place. I'm still gonna put Pokemon the first movie, and the reason why,
Trash!
as much as I really resonated with Mewtwo, as you mentioned, my some of my gripes with Pokemon the first movie is I felt like it was a little short. Now, it definitely did what it needed to do. I mean, we talked about Pokemon the first movie for like a solid hour, and as you guys can probably see, we very much enjoyed the movie. Uh, but it felt a little short. I feel like there could have been more dialogue from some of the characters, but like I said, I think that may have been intentional because this is very much about the Pokemon and Mewtwo and not about Ash in the game, which once again, kind of breaking our perceptions of the anime because we think of Ash as the main character, but the main character of that movie is Mewtwo, most definitely. I mean, maybe that should bump it up, but I am going to put it. I am going to put it in the third seat. I'm going to give it the bronze.
Trash!
I'm going to give
Trash!
it the bronze.
Trash!
But critically, I think it's like a 9 out of 10 movie, which is really really good, right? I mean, that's really good.
What's your overall score emotionally? Like
Oh,
critically,
emotional.
emotionally,
Oh, okay.
investment, entertainmentally.
So entertainment wise, I love Pokemon to death. So entertainment wise, I'd probably give it a 9.5. I was never bored. So
Fair
I'll
enough.
give it like what I feel is a 9.5, and I think critically it's like a 9, or maybe I should switch those. I think I feel it's a 9, but critically it may be more of a 9.5 for
Fair
what it
enough.
did. Number 2, I'm still going to give to Your Name. Your Name, it was the first anime movie I think I ever gave a 10 out of 10 for, I believe. Don't quote me on that. for all it did, I liked the way it handled the sci-fi. I liked how it felt like their love was from the middle of the movie to the climax felt so out of reach, so impossible, and yet it was made possible because of their love for one another. I'm a sucker for romance, so I think that's part of my enjoyment for it. I think the romance aspect for Your Name was handled really well. I liked the sci-fi for what it did because I think it's very important that they symbolize taking a walk in someone else's shoes, showing that empathy. I thought that was very important, and not only was it symbolically great, but it led to some really entertaining moments and some really cute moments. So for me, Your Name is still a 10 out of 10 for me, and for that reason, it just holds a special place in my heart for how they handled the romance and all that good stuff. And the music and everything was great, as was Weathering with You, but I gave my spill on that. And number one is still going to be A Silent Voice for me. What it did that Your Name didn't, I felt like it was truly a character growth story. I gushed about it already earlier. I probably had like a 30-minute monologue about Your Name, but just here, Ishida's an amazing protagonist. Just seeing him come full circle and being able to truly empathize was amazing. I love seeing his character. I even love the art style. I didn't mention how great
Oh yeah,
KyoAni is,
yeah,
but
great.
art style was amazing. I love how they symbolized him not having those connections and the X's dropping in him, realizing he deserved. I feel like there's a lot of similarities almost between a lot of these movies, but feeling like Ishida truly deserved to have these connections and could offer something to society. He wasn't the monster he thought he was. He had made a mistake, and what's important is not rectifying the mistake necessarily, just that, but also learning from the mistake. And his character growth was learning from those mistakes in the past, the hard way a lot of the time because he was bullied, but having that full journey was very important to me. So for me, I don't want to gush on anymore about it, but for me, A Silent Voice is also a 10 out of 10, but also higher than Your Name for number one on my list.
Fair enough.
Yes, sir.
Now I'm going to spring something on you.
Yes,
We're
sir.
going to take our favorite character from each movie and then rank them up against each other.
Oh gosh. Okay.
We're going to then
Okay.
okay. So number 5 for
Okay.
me, Kaneda. Love Kaneda. Really cool
Hmm.
protagonist, just not as strong as the others. Number
All right.
4. Number 4 is going to be, this is so hard, but I think it's going to be Hina. I love Hina, love her to pieces, but her and my number 3 being Mitsuha, those two could go back and forth like
I
I
think our
love.
list may be similar by the end of this.
Actually, the more I think about it, Hina may not be my favorite character in the movie. Number 4, I'm going to give to Mitsuha. Number 4 is going to have Mitsuha. Love her to pieces, great character. Number 3 is going to
Yes,
be
sir.
Keisuke.
Yes,
Keisuke is my
sir.
favorite
Here we go.
character.
Yes, that's it.
I forgot about Keisuke for a second, bro. So just go
Hmm.
Mitsuha, adorable. Keisuke, absolute Chad. Love him to pieces,
Absolute
great
Chad.
character development. Number 2
Mhm.
is going to be my boy Ishida. That character's development was amazing. And honestly, if I'm not in a Pokemon mood, he could be like number 1 in probably a couple weeks. And number 1's Mewtwo. Amazing character, amazing
Okay.
antagonist, amazing villain. I could go on about him all day. Hit me up with
Yeah.
yours.
Our lists are very similar. I so at number five, I'm going to put Kaneda as well. He was the best thing about Akira.
For sure, for
I'll
sure, for
I'll
sure.
say I'll
Great
say that
character.
right now. Entertaining character. I actually had really while he was kind of what should I say, the typical bad boy on the outside. Actually had a good heart, and I liked his character quite a bit. But he's still number five on my list. Number four, I'm going to also put Mitsuha. She was my favorite thing about Your Name. Um, Obviously, they're the main focus, but I loved Mitsuha in Your Name. I think she got really appropriate development, really cute, amazing voice actress. Really gave some great emotional performances too. So she's number four. Number three, I'm also going to put the Chad Keisuke. Easy.
Hey.
He was the best thing about Weathering with You for me. And number two, like you said, in Weathering with You particularly would have been Hina for me. But Keisuke is my favorite character there. Now one and two, I'm kind of the same way you are. I I don't know, and that's what I was alluding to in my closer that Ishida and Mewtwo actually never thought I'd say this. Surprisingly, have some similarities when I think about it.
Yeah.
But it's tough. I think I'm going to put Mewtwo in number two. Maybe this is just for the sake of diversity. I could honestly swap them or
Fair
give
enough.
them a tied spot for number one. But I think I'm going to put Mewtwo for number two, and I'm going to put Ishida for number one. And I think the reason maybe that I guess I can relate a little more personally to Ishida, obviously,
I mean, fair
than
enough.
Mewtwo. Yeah, no, but I think that's the deal with Mewtwo is that despite him being a Pokemon, extremely human character. That's the whole point of his story. Um, but I can relate a little more to Ishida, and Ishida
I
hit
think
home with
this is going to
me a
sound
little
weird, but I
more.
think I relate more to
Yeah,
Mewtwo just because Mewtwo's question, like with Ishida, a big relation with
I've never
Ishida is
bullied
that you're.
someone.
I
Yeah,
didn't bully someone like that.
yeah, that's true. I've never bullied anyone,
I
but I've
bully
also never
like
been
people.
cloned.
Fair enough, but like Mewtwo's
Yeah,
questions are more like my place in
yeah, they,
society and the world in general. With
yeah,
Ishida, it's a lot more. I know. I like. They're very
yeah.
close. I love them both to death. Amazing, both 10 out of 10 characters in my opinion. So
What I will say about Ishida is why I don't relate to the bullying. And this may be surprising, especially since we're doing a podcast where we're being very open and we talk with people. In the past, I've been able to talk with people like very easily all the time, but I've always had trouble like making genuine connections because I would always be afraid to say the wrong thing, or I would be afraid
same,
that
brother.
people maybe, yeah, or people that may be making fun of me behind my back, or they may actually not think that I'm worth much. Sometimes it's been hard, and I think we all struggled with this to different degrees, making those connections with people. So for me, that was the most relatable out of all the characters, and I think that's why he kind of squeaks out number one on my list.
Fair
But we're
enough.
very similar. We're very
Fair
similar.
enough.
On a different day, they could be even for number one for me. So,
That's same for me. But
mhm.
God, we have talked for like almost 2 hours. Thank you
Yes, yeah,
all so much for watching this. Even with two people here, I think we've had some great discussions, going in depth about a lot of movies. I would love to do this more again. Honestly, Forte, I'd love to have us watch some more series and stories and movies together and have this become a thing on the podcast.
definitely.
Because I think us going back and forth on these podcasts is genuinely fun. It's genuinely
Oh
fun.
yeah, super enjoyable.
And I think
Yeah, definitely.
we have a very similar way of viewing stories and characters and things like that. So that's why we tend to agree on some stuff. It's nice having a podcast where people agree and not just scream at each other. Am I right? But yes,
Oh
thank
yeah,
you all.
definitely.
Thank you all so much for watching. If you enjoyed, make sure to like, comment, share, subscribe, share with your friends. We're trying to grow the channel. Hopefully, if you have any like tips or tricks or advice, make sure to leave that down as well. We're always willing to grow, always willing to change, always willing to evolve. But as always, guys, have an amazing day. Thank you for watching, and peace out.
See you guys.